Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London as we discuss the next steps of personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets with last generation Meta avatars where we're using hand tracking and built-in microphones. I want to say thank you to our patrons. That's Richard Meller, Mike Manzano, HoloNet, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums out there, and XR Developer News. David, I know we've got more than a dozen articles to cover today on our show, and so there's no room for tangents. I encourage you to subscribe to Upload VR. If you're new around here, getting your first rundown of the future, be sure to check out our developer interviews and live gameplay streams with Don Hopper. I've seen out in our comments that some people like to listen to our shows while they're working. Others have us on while they're going to bed. We've reported on some layoffs, and that means some hard times out there for some members of this community. And just want to say we're thinking of you. And since I don't have time later to comment, I just wanted to take the space here to say that 2025 is the year that VR is really starting to cement itself as a foundational layer in personal computing, and it is going to be a lot to digest. So thank you for being with us. Take a deep breath out there. David, what do we have today?
Yeah, we do have an enormous show today. Partially that's because I was off last week at a family wedding, as I mentioned in our last episode 2 weeks ago, and partially just because there's been a lot of news dropping. So we have a total of 16 topics today, broken out into different sections at points. And as Ian mentioned, yes, we'll have no room for tangents today. So I'll try to keep us on track, and the audience will try to keep us on track. And I'm sure Ian will also try to keep us on track. So we're going to quickly talk about GeForce Now arriving on Quest 3, Pico, and Apple Vision Pro's web browsers. We will talk about VRChat releasing age verification for VRChat Plus subscribers, real age verification with your ID. We will then talk about Sony's Yoshida's comment about PlayStation VR 2. I'm sorry, I was wrong. And we'll talk about what he meant by that and what PSVR 2's current status is. We'll then talk about Snap offering its AR spectacles to students and educators for half the price that it offers them to developers for, $50 a month. Then we will have a Meta section. We will talk about Meta's plan to eventually make Quest scene mesh scans update automatically and how significant that will be for mixed reality. We will talk about Bloomberg's Mark Gurman's report that Meta is working on a Quest Pro successor again. We will talk about Meta Reality Labs achieving its highest ever quarterly revenue, just as Quest 3S launched 1.08 billion, and the leaked memo suggesting that their sales figures grew by 40% last year. I'm sure that will be a lively section given the strong feelings on that on different sides. We'll talk about the smart glasses strategy from Meta. They're enlisting A-list celebrities to promote the Ray-Ban glasses at the Super Bowl this year. They also reportedly plan to launch Oakley Meta glasses. They also, according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, will start offering the Orion AR glasses to developers next year ahead of a consumer AR glasses launch in 2027. Finally, we will talk about Mark Zuckerberg's weird comment during the Meta earnings call about long-term investments arriving to make Horizon worlds visually stunning. That will conclude the Meta section. Then we will briefly talk about Mudra Link, which is a $200 Meta neural wristband alternative. So they're doing the same thing as Meta's SEMG wristband, or at least something very similar, but they're going to make that available to any device, any glasses, and even your traditional devices. And that shows how that technology is not just available from Meta. We will then have a penultimate section, a small Apple section. We will talk about Apple's new store having a dedicated Vision Pro side room. So very much so different from the headlines you might have heard about Apple of them considering Vision Pro dead, or even the crazy, ridiculous headlines about them discontinuing Vision Pro. No, the reality is very, very different. We'll then talk about Bloomberg's Mark Gurman's report again. that Apple is still working on MicroLED displays for AR glasses, with the earliest product launch around 2028. Finally, we will have the Android XR section at the end, and we will talk about Google acquiring some of HTC Vive's engineering team for Android XR, and MKBHD's video, which gives the first real look at Samsung's headset and the Android XR operating system it ran on. Ian did try it in December, and he had a report which you should read, and we did link in our article about this, but he wasn't allowed to take his own videos or photos or footage, whereas MKBHD, as far as I'm aware, most popular tech YouTuber, was given that exclusive opportunity.
So we have a question out there from Geek Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, asking us if we own any Meta stock. I do not.
No, absolutely not. That would be deeply, deeply inappropriate for people in our position.
Yeah, I've got a disclosure on my author page of my relationship for my spouse. I mentioned that. I disclosed that on my page, and I've going back many years. There were things like NVIDIA. I people like asking me what would you buy, and like I have to say, well, NVIDIA looks pretty good, and have to never buy NVIDIA myself. And like there were people out there that I had to be like, yeah, right, NVIDIA is looking pretty good, and I didn't buy it myself, and that is one of many stocks I do not own. So that was a very, very, very big list of topics to get through. I'm seeing a lot of regular viewers, a lot of new viewers. I see Anti-Cleric out there, Arlen. I saw one of our subscribers watching us on a bus as they move around the world. I see everyone tuning in to us from all over various locations all over the world. It's really, really cool to see. Let's move through this episode, David. What do we want to do first?
Yeah, so we'll start by just quickly covering that GeForce Now news. This was announced earlier this month, but now it has arrived. So if you have a Quest 3, a Quest 3S, a Pico headset, or an Apple Vision Pro, you can go to your web browser, go to the GeForce Now website, and you can start playing the traditional PC games that you already own from, let me bring up the list here, Steam, Epic Games, Ubisoft, Microsoft Store, EA Store, or GOG. So this is a very different type of service to Xbox Cloud Gaming. NVIDIA is just providing the cloud capabilities, whereas the actual store and purchasing stuff is done from your existing PC stores. So, if you don't own a gaming PC at all and you want to go play a AAA game that's either only available on PC or you don't own a console either, you can just buy it on the Steam website or the Steam phone app, put this website up on your Quest headset and play it on a giant virtual screen, assuming that you've paired a gamepad. You can get a Bluetooth gamepad on Amazon off-brand for like $10 or $15, or if you want to get one of the proper ones from Sony or Microsoft, I think that's somewhere around $40 or $50. So you can just jump straight into that sort of gaming. The pricing is variable depending on what kind of resolution and quality you want. They do have a free tier, but it's ad supported and has long queues. Then they have this kind of performance tier for $10 a month. You get 1440p and RTX features, and then you obviously get the ultimate one for $20 a month, which gives you kind of all of the NVIDIA rendering features and the shortest queues. So this joins Xbox Cloud Gaming, which is already on Quest, and it's just another way to play traditional flat screen games without a PC on a giant virtual screen.
Yep, and these are in the browser, so I think of that as kind of like a double-edged sword, where it's like you lose some features by being in the browser, but you also gain some features by being in the browser. It's actually quite a benefit when you can share a browser window with other people, really, as well as, I don't know, having 5 other windows around you doing other things. Pretty cool. I haven't run this yet. Have you done any stress testing of how this works and how this feels in VR yet, David?
Yeah, I tried it out on Quest and Vision Pro just out of curiosity, and it worked really well. My experience, I don't regularly use this kind of platform, but I always like to test it to see how it's going, is that GeForce Now seems to have the lowest latency of any of the cloud streaming services. I think that's because, I was trying the ultimate tier, and I think they run it at like a higher frame rate on the server itself, and then kind of bringing it down at 60 for you in the browser at least. So the input latency there is lower because it's rendering at something like 120, 240, depending on the game. So I find it to be slightly lower latency than Xbox Cloud Gaming. It, paired instantly with my Steam account, and I was able to play my Steam games, or at least most of them. Developers can opt out of this if they want to. And I think it's a great option. I wonder why they don't have an app. Rather, they do have an Android app, they do have an iPad app, but they've gone with the browser. But it's better than nothing. As I said, though, the last time we talked about this, what I would love to see them do here is bring back their 3D gaming thing. So like 15 years ago, NVIDIA had this driver to allow you to play certain PC games in 3D on these glasses 3D monitors that were there. Obviously, those sucked, as we've talked about on this show all the time. Glasses 3D sucks, whether it be on your TV or in the cinema, for a whole bunch of reasons: crosstalk, eye strain, brightness issues. If they could let you play AAA games in 3D on these headsets, that would be a really good reason to jump into this, right? Because then you get something that you can't even get even if you do own a PC or a console. Though, of course, ideally, they do add it to PC as well for people using something like Steam Link or other methods. Like, I think Don Hopper here, UploadVR, is saying that they use Parsec to connect to their PC.
Yeah, so Arlen's saying they have mixed feelings about all these different subscription models. We're owning less and less things. We're renting access to things. I know I rant about this often, but it feels more like a feudal idea. I appreciate that, and that's in what you're describing is sort of the going the opposite way of what I'm doing with my current system. I'm trying to bring up in all my legacy media into my headset one at a time, from DVDs to Blu-ray to Game Boy cartridges. Bring all these things with me in every headset in as many places around my home as possible. But what gets really interesting is when you think about services like GeForce or whatever other services you've got now, like Steam Link has that lockdown, that experience of whole home screencasting really, really well done today. Virtual Desktop has that done really, really well as well. But what does it look like to get from like your home server to, I don't know, half a mile away from your home? What is that service to, like, how does that streaming work? Is it going to be your cell phone provider? Is it going to be GeForce? How do you get all your local media from your home to your like neighborhood?
Yeah, so on the ownership thing, that's why I like the GeForce Now model here. Again, this is not a games catalog. They are not selling you a bunch of games, renting you a bunch of games for this price. They're renting you a cloud PC, or a virtual cloud PC at least, for that price. If you try this out for a bit and decide, you know what, I like PC gaming, I'm going to go buy my PC. Well, if you bought those games, whether it be on Steam or GOG or whatever, you still have those games on your PC. And sure, there's a debate about, do you even own a Steam game? But we'll put that aside for now. So that's why I do like this model, because you do own, insofar as you own any digital entitlement, these games. When it comes to what you're saying about connecting to your own device, if you do own a PC, yeah, Steam Link is great. Virtual Desktop is great. Virtual Desktop has supported the ability to access your PC remotely for a long time now. I don't think Steam Link does by default, unless you set up some sort of like tunnel and trick it a bit, but at least in my experience. But Virtual Desktop does support that out of the box. And I have actually done that, where I've been at a hotel and I've brought my Quest headset with me, and I've accessed my PC remotely using Guy Godin's Virtual Desktop. I think he's in the comments. So that's how you do it, right? And it's just going to depend on the quality of the Wi-Fi network you're on, as well as the quality of your home internet if you're on PC, but if you're on Ethernet, sorry. But generally that works quite well.
I like Michael Booth's question. Is UploadVR an investor in Virtual Desktop? Guy Godin, you share the details. You're the only one that can answer this definitively amongst our audience. So we'll have you answer that for everyone out there.
We should probably make clear, we're not, just in case anyone's asking in serious, we're not invested in any, we do not have stocks or shares or whatever, or investments in any VR company. We don't have that sort of conflict of interest. We've called out certain people in the industry for having that conflict of interest. There's a certain evangelist in the industry who owns a lot of Apple shares and mysteriously and coincidentally hypes up everything to do with Apple for the last 10 years, but we don't do that.
Yeah, and Guy Godin saying they're not a public company, lol, and yeah, we don't own any private shares either of Guy Godin. To be clear on that, definitively, as David is pointing out, we really need to move through this episode, though. We're ready to talk about VRChat already, or is there anything else you want to talk about here?
Yeah, let's talk about VRChat. I think you can lead that. You were the one to look into this. It seems like a really interesting but privacy controversial idea.
Yeah, so VRChat released their age verification feature for VRChat Plus subscribers. So this is their subscription service, and we were just talking about subscription a minute ago. There's of course many subscriptions bubbling up in various ways in VR, but VRChat obviously is going to be a big one. It's going to be one of the biggest ones. So they're attaching that subscription program to the first major use of age verification. This was announced late last year, and now it's actually rolling out for the subscribers here. It uses an external verification system called Persona, I believe is what it's called, and as soon as that got announced, immediately people got very frustrated that it required some use of real world ID or your webcam in order to verify that you are who you say you are. And that said, now it's going out in numbers and being used across large instances. So as I've explained previously on the show or on the Gamescast, we did set up um, a group over on VRChat to try to set up a members only group where people who are part of this community can go over there and find all of the VRChat worlds that Don Hopper has painstakingly toured and made videos of to show all of our viewers out there. Well, it would be amazing if the viewers in this community could easily hop into private worlds only with adult users, because we've seen it in our comments here how frustrating it is to encounter squeakers, and this would be a path to do that. Well, we now in that group have the ability as VRChat Plus subscribers to use age verification. So when I first set up the group last year to test this feature, we needed that in order to move forward with it. Now age verification is actually there. I don't I've lost interest partially in messing with VRChat system to make this work for our favor, but it is there now. Like, this is what people could do. You could actually gate your bars or other adult only communities from children, and I think that's a recurring request amongst the members of our community out there to have that kind of division. So we'll see how this rolls out and how the implementation works and doesn't work, and see if other people start doing the same thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy here, understandably, about the privacy trade-off here, right? You are giving this third-party company your government ID, or at least a photo of it, and putting photos of your face and doing this very manual, very specific age verification process. At the end of the day, though, there aren't really any more options, right? Like, if you want to have a space that everyone in is an adult, this is the way to do it, right? You can say only adults can join it, but children can just use their parents' headset, or they can just sign up. And everyone here, I'm sure, when they were a child, has scrolled back on the year to access some sort of game or other website they wanted to access before they were really supposed to. How do you get around that without some sort of verification? There are, of course, creative ways. There is a bar in Horizon Worlds, I think one of the best worlds in Horizon Worlds, that uses your arm span. You have to reach your arms out as wide as possible. And if you don't get past a certain arm span, then you don't get in, or you have to talk to a bouncer whose job it is to let people in if their arm span isn't that wide. Because the obvious problem is, what if you're just an adult who happens to have small arms? Or what if you're a kid that's drinks a lot of milk and your arms are really, really wide? This is imperfect. I see Opsar in the comments questioning squeaker voice detection. Yeah, you could do like average voice pitch, but what about kids who have deep voices, or adults who have high voices? There's always going to be problems around that. And at the end of the day, if you want to do a kind of fault proof, or at least, probably 99 point something % accurate method, ID verification is probably the only way, unless you've just have that bouncer there 24/7 that's checking everyone, and even then they're going to make mistakes, right?
And part of a larger trend worldwide or in various governments, not worldwide because it's not every government, but to ID the users of the internet and their web usage to gate adult experiences across all of the internet. So this is part of a trend overall across many different ways. I'm ready to talk about number 3 here. I think I'm seeing a lot of ongoing conversation here. I see Blair out there in the comments. We're going to be sure to talk to Blair later in the episode when we get to the meta section. So I'm glad you're tuned in today, Blair, for us to talk about that. We're ready to talk about Sony's comment?
Yeah, we should probably just clarify that squeaker is a derogatory term used by multiplayer VR users for children, because they're constantly on the microphone with high voices, and that's what people would tend to call them. I want to point out Amelia Faust's comment that the idea of using arm span and things like that would also have accessibility implications. Amputees, for example, there are a bunch of problems around that. Let's talk about that Sony comment from Shu. Because this one really went wide. We saw a lot of traffic to this article, a lot of discussion around this. This is something that people are clearly very passionate about, and we've discussed many times on this show the trajectory of PlayStation VR 2, and it seems to be somewhat changing recently. So this is quite a complex topic now. So, if you didn't catch this on our website, Shu was is a Sony Interactive Entertainment, the name of the subsidiary of Sony that does PlayStation, veteran. He was there for 30 years or so before retiring 2 weeks ago. He was there all the way back at the original PlayStation VR, where he led the third-party licensing program. In the year 2000, he became a vice president of the company's worldwide studios, which today is called PlayStation Studios. In 2008, he was promoted to the president of studios, where he stayed until 2019. So he led that division, PlayStation Studios, through most of the PlayStation 3 era and most of the PlayStation 4 era. And then he, for the past few years, moved on to a sort of pre-retirement role of supporting external developers. So his first interview after leaving the company after 30 years was on the Kind of Funny Games cast with Greg Miller. And this was a very long conversation, 2 or 3 hours, and they discussed a lot of things. But one of the things they discussed, of course, was PlayStation VR. So when it comes to the original PlayStation VR for PS4 and PS5, if you had the adapter, Shu said that it was the most fun he had personally at the company. The original PlayStation VR was a highlight of his career. Greg Miller, then, the host of this interview, said that whenever we talk about VR, you coming on the GDC show and talking about, look, this is where we are at PlayStation 1 again. We're starting from scratch. And Shu, in response to that, said, I'm sorry I was wrong. PSVR 2 didn't become PS2. So Greg followed up with the simple question, what happened with PSVR 2, Shu? And he said, well, let's move on. Now, they discussed it about a minute or so later, and Shu did say that 2 PSVR 2 games that he thought were 5-star, excellent, 10 out of 10, were Synapse and Before Your Eyes. The latter, he said, Before Your Eyes, was one of only 2 times in his gaming career of 30 years that he legitimately cried at the content of a game. So that's Before Your Eyes on PlayStation VR 2. And Greg Miller said that he had the exact same response to that. So it's interesting that he really didn't want to go into detail on PSVR 2. He did, he was out of his leading role there by then. So it's possible he just didn't want to talk about the work of his successor. But it's quite clear that he obviously doesn't have a positive view on what happened there. From what it sounds like, his hope was that PlayStation VR 2 would build on the success of PSVR 1 and become a much more popular, wider product that would kind of mimic the path there from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2. And in his view, that did not happen.
Yeah, so I reached out to see if they would be willing to have an interview with us for a follow-up here, because I wanted to dive in deeper on this, and politely declined, which very, very polite response on saying no to the interview. But I would just open invitation if you ever want to sit down with us and look back at the years, the early days. There was this description of building a God of War demo on a hacked together kit. And it really speaks to the heart and beginning of this industry. And I would love to pin up on a timeline the date of that demo, in comparison to a dinner that happened between Palmer Luckey and Brendan Arieb at Oculus down in Los Angeles. Basically, that there's a founding story there where Palmer Luckey had some options in front of him. He could have gone and done a couple different things back in the early days of founding Oculus. And he ended up doing this dinner with the founders of Oculus. He ended up taking money from them and then co-founding Oculus, basically getting the rest is history, so to speak, right? You get the Kickstarter story and everything else after that. But there was a period here where some people in the industry knew that Sony was messing around with VR technology, and there were already bunches of VR ideas on the table. There was already phone-based headset ideas in the market, but the idea that Sony was like messing around with VR gets undersold as like a critical part of spawning everything else that happened with Oculus. And it would have been amazing to unfold that story with him definitively for the record. And so just open invitation to talk about that and really get that story once and for all for the record, and understand, who talked to who and when in these early days of VR's foundation, because that God of War demo sounds like it really opened some eyes to the idea that they could actually ship hardware now that would sell.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sony was one of the first companies to the new wave, to the consumer VR, right? Project Morpheus was generating so much excitement as early as 2014. You had kind of two serious headsets there, the Oculus DK2, Developer Kit 2, and Sony's Project Morpheus, which would go on to become the original PlayStation VR. And although the original PlayStation VR was essentially itself hacked together, right? It used just the PlayStation 4's camera that was never designed to be used for it. It used the PlayStation Move controllers, which debuted with the PlayStation 3, and this kind of, simple headset that by today's standards, isn't great and it's very, very low resolution, but they delivered something great there because of two reasons. One, that the price was right, or at least it was right for some of the time. It launched between $300 and $400, depending on whether you got just the headset or whether you also got the controllers and camera. At times, they had these aggressive sales that brought it down to as low as $200, sometimes even less, near the holiday season. And you saw these things fly off the shelves. And the other was that they had a great content strategy. There were a lot of great games on PlayStation VR that not only didn't come to any other platform, but didn't even come to PlayStation VR 2. And I see a lot of people in our comments pointing that out because it's so frustrating for PlayStation VR 2 owners that are hoping to see the potential of this platform really unlocked, right? So on the original PlayStation VR, you had Skyrim in VR, you had Minecraft, you had Star Wars Squadrons, you had these great first-party titles like Blood and Truth, you had Astrobot, and then what happens next? You think that what Sony should do is look at what they did well and build on it, right? What they should have had is, yes, something with inside-out tracking, so you get rid of all that complexity of having the cameras and the complexity. You need controllers that are made for VR with thumbsticks. You get rid of those PS Move. They did that right. But what they really should have done is had something that was either the same price or cheaper. And on day one, it should have played everything that PlayStation VR 1 played and add more things. Instead, they come along with a headset that is $550, more expensive than the PlayStation 5 itself, which people were already struggling to afford, and complete cutoff, no compatibility with any PlayStation VR 1 content to this day. So you have these gigantic games like Skyrim, like Minecraft, and yes, it's going away, but it would have been there for years if it had been there at launch, and Astrobot that just aren't available. So I think these are the two issues, right? It's too expensive. They didn't have backwards compatibility, and then you can argue about whether they followed up with enough content. You had a great launch, I think. Resident Evil 8, Horizon Call of the Mountain, Gran Turismo 7, and then they really didn't manage to follow it up. Yes, Capcom came along with Resident Evil 4. Recently, we've seen a lot of cross-platform titles, Behemoth, Alien Isolation, Metro Awakening, but those weren't Sony's doing. Those are coming to other platforms as well. The interesting buck to this trend is that in last year, we saw two periods where Sony cut the price of this thing from $550 to $350. Once was during the summer, and then was for pretty much the entire holiday season. During the summer, we saw a retailer say that in the first day of that sale, and this was in the summer, they sold more units on that day than they had sold the entire year so far. Then at Christmas, you see this happen, the holiday season. This was for like the end of November and all of December. It's down to this same $350 price. Now even better value because it comes with Call of the Mountain, Horizon Call of the Mountain. And developers start saying, we're seeing a real uptick in PlayStation VR2 sales. Some developers even said that they were seeing more sales of their game on PSVR 2 than they were on Quest. And others are saying that PSVR 2 is now a close second. You can talk about the dynamics on the Quest ecosystem that might have made that happen, but on the PlayStation VR side, this is a real increase. So I think it's really, really clear what's wrong here. It's the price. And this is not a bad product. It really isn't. If they could do two things on its anniversary, which is in just under a month from now, cut the price permanently to $350 and release some sort of backwards compatibility with PSVR 1 content, and they can figure it out. Of course they can. That's not the Sony software engineers. If they really want to, they can figure that out. If they did those two things, I think you could really see a resurgence in this. If they don't, we're stuck where we are.
Yeah, very, very interesting conversation. There was a period there. I don't want to misremember history or I don't want to misconstrue the way things went, but there was a period there around the acquisition of Camouflage with Batman Arkham Shadow releasing a few years later exclusively for the Quest ecosystem for Quest 3. There was a period there of building when like Sony was building towards PSVR 2 and Quest was building towards its second and third generations, and Meta went out there and swiped up Camouflage and made Batman Arkham Shadow a Quest only exclusive. There's another universe that I like to think about that I feel like could have existed, where he got to bring Batman Arkham Shadow over to PSVR 2. And we got to see all those PSVR 2 owners out there got to enjoy Batman Arkham Shadow on their PSVR 2s. There was a universe where that happened, but it's not this universe. It's not the universe where people actually paid as much as you said for this device and didn't get that amazing game. How different would it have felt to own a PSVR 2 if something like that had happened?
I think that's a valid point, but at the same time, Sony already owns a bunch of studios, right? They also have great relations with studios who they fund to either do timed exclusives or permanent exclusives on PlayStation. If they wanted to build PlayStation VR 2 games, they could do it. They're just deprioritizing it. We know now from wide reporting that they put a bunch of money into these flat screen live service games, one of which, Concord, just completely failed on launch, and others they are now cancelling or scaling down because they realized that wasn't really what gamers wanted. You have this discussion in this article. You should go read it for his full context, where he says of how blown away he was, between 10 and 15 years ago when he tried this put together God of War demo. Build a God of War VR game, you have all of these IPs, and sure, you did it with Horizon Call of the Mountain. Great. But they needed to release a Horizon Call of the Mountain each year, right? What Meta's been doing so far is that they had Asgard's Wrath 2 last year, Batman Arkham Shadow this year. If Sony is serious about this, they need to support it with at least that each year. You can't just launch, 2 or 3 great launch titles, and then nothing. It was I think it was such a shock to PlayStation VR2 owners when the anniversary came up, and everyone in the PlayStation VR2 community was saying, I can't wait to see what AAA game Sony has in store for 2024. It's the anniversary tomorrow. Let's see what they have to say. And there was nothing. Instead, what happened was they teased the PC compatibility, which is cool, but for a PlayStation 5 owner who doesn't want a PC, they don't care. And then a few weeks later, they shut down a studio that was working on VR games and laid off a bunch of people at another one. It was the complete opposite of what people wanted to see.
I mean, I'm gonna break apart your compatibility. Like, so Geek Odin out in the comments echoed what you said, David, about backwards compatibility being the thing that killed this out the gate. But I'm gonna argue the gamepad. Like, I still want. We just got finished with GeForce discussion talking about how cool it would be to have 3D games floating in front of you. Like, that's out of the box something Sony could do with a vast majority of its content with gamepad games floating on a screen in front of you. And right now, Sony's doing some interesting things in PC, and we're very confused by it. We're very confused by the standalone system that they announced recently. We weren't blown away necessarily by their headset, but the Mokopi trackers, when they're saying, 12 of them in their professional system that you can attach to a PC. So you can imagine like a full body PSVR2 VRChat system that's PC powered. You've got your PSVR2, you've got two PSVR2 controllers in your hand, the dual sense controllers in your hand, and then 12 points of body tracking in addition to your head through your body, all syncing up to a PC. And you're talking cost is probably $1,000 to $2,000 or something like that. I can't remember what there was an expensive price tag on the 12 pack of that, right?
Yeah, but you can do that today with the simpler consumer Mokopi, and it doesn't matter which headset you have, right? And you can do that, right? PlayStation VR2 works on PC, you go buy the adapter, you buy Mokopi, or you could buy Vive trackers, and you've got that. But that doesn't matter to people who bought a PS5 for this or bought this for their PS5 and don't want a gaming PC, right? That is, again, all of this PC stuff is great. It's great that we now have a high quality OLED PC VR headset at around 600 to 650 all in, depending on what adapters and cables you need. That's great for the PC VR market. PlayStation 5 owners that don't want a PC don't care.
All right, well, we should move on here. I've been enjoying the pace here. We've been moving through these topics quickly. We should probably keep that up and keep the comments coming. Thank you for the discussion. Hit the like button, share this link out to others. We're going to move into the meta section here in a little bit, and we have a long show ahead. As at the end of this show, we're going to talk about Android XR, and I thought about bringing it up here, but no, we're going to save that for the end of the episode. But Android XR coming back from the dead, so to speak, with Google's efforts, reminds me of what Sony is in a similar boat of having to figure out how to get itself together in this new day and age. So yeah, Anti-Cleric said they missed that entire topic. We're still going to discuss you soon, Blair. Your topic's coming up soon, Blair. All right, David, we ready to talk about the Snap subject now?
Yeah, so this is quite interesting. We talked a few months ago how Snapchat has these true AR glasses. They are standalone AR glasses. Unlike Meta's Orion prototype, it doesn't even need a compute puck. These are an all-in-one device, but they're not a consumer product yet. They're only available to developers for $99 a month. And that's not a purchase plan. That is a rental. You cannot purchase these things. That still isn't changing. What they have changed is that they're now offering it to students and educators. So people who have a valid.edu email address. This is referring to tertiary education, universities, professors and students there who want to do interesting things with transparent AR for $50 a month. So that's a lot more accessible. But again, it's a rental, right? Once you stop paying, you have to give these things back. And there's a 12-month commitment. So you have to pay for at least 12 months to stay within that contract. we've discussed our thoughts on spectacles before. To summarize it, it's essentially a HoloLens 2, but in very bulky glasses form factor. So they have taken that idea of, roughly 50-degree diagonal field of view AR. It's 46 degrees. They have a great resolution. That's something really great about them. They have pretty much the same angular resolution as Apple Vision Pro. You've got great hand tracking and environment meshing. But the field of view, in my experience, is still an Achilles heel here. It's actually slightly lower than HoloLens 2. HoloLens 2 is 52. This is 46. In comparison, what made the Meta Orion prototype such a kind of hype wave and a breakthrough in some ways is that it has a 70-degree horizontal field of view. So 46, 70. Now, of course, that has to be caveated with the fact that Meta's Orion prototype is a prototype that Meta says costs on the order of $10,000 to make each unit. They describe it as a time machine for the future. They're only making reportedly around 1,000 of them, whereas Snapchat has a kind of half product here. They're offering it to developers on rental. They are making these things at probably a much higher scale, probably in the low tens of thousands. And now you can see with this education program, they're expanding it. So what I think Snap is doing really, really well here, and I want to really commend them on, is their software approach. Snap OS and its entire architecture is so kind of lightweight and reminiscent of Vision OS. It takes the same idea of putting so much of the runtime onto the operating system layer and then having the applications be these very light things that just kind of provide assets and scripts and basic data, and then all of the heavy stuff is still in the OS. And that has some real advantages. It means that apps can install and run really, really quickly, right? It's not like, when you're running a certain mixed reality game on Quest and you're waiting like 30 to 40 seconds just to get in. This is like you click it and you're in a few seconds. The other thing is that they can then do some of the things Vision OS does in the shared space, where everything can be multiplayer by default without the developer having to do, months or the minimum weeks of work. You can just have shared space co-located multiplayer for any Snap OS app. They call them lenses rather than apps, but that's not important. And I thought that was the most impressive part of my Spectacles demo, that you can launch an app, the person beside you sees a nearby session detected, they tap, and boom, you're seeing the same thing in the same space. None of the friction of, let me invite you with this invite code or add you as a friend and connect to. No, it just works. I think that's going to be their advantage here. I think Snap has stumbled across a really interesting software approach that, again, I want to say is kind of like what Vision OS did for mixed reality, this does for transparent AR. But this hardware right now, it just isn't particularly impressive. You can see that it doesn't achieve the goal of looking like glasses. I always like to ask normal people in my life. By normal, I mean people who aren't in the tech industry, what they think of certain things. I love demoing headsets and glasses to people who aren't involved in this. And every reaction I've seen to this is, damn, those things are ugly. And now this is the developer kit. It's not a product yet, but if you look at the weight of these things, these are actually like 226 grams, I think, which is like half of a Quest headset compared to something like Meta's Orion, which is just under 100 grams. So I don't think they have the right hardware approach here, but I do think they have the right software approach. And it's great now that educators and universities can do transparent AR, because Microsoft discontinued HoloLens 2 last year. So this is pretty much now the only option for that.
Yeah, so right after this section, we have a massive section on Meta. And in that section, we're going to discuss various types of glasses. There's HUD glasses, there's full AR glasses, there's glasses that have no display whatsoever, which are the current generation Ray-Bans that have audio responsive AI capabilities that aren't necessary to use. So there's many, many different classes of hardware here. So I really appreciate that we've started with what is possible in augmented reality, see-through optics today. You see these thick black rims around, thick frames all the way back to past your ears. That's what it takes to deliver augmented reality. And I have to give the example of the piano. So my demo that I went and did for the second time in Snap Spectacles, they had a piano set up in front of me, and I was able to put my fingers on the piano and have a Beat Saber type training experience. I played out a whole right inside of their demo in seconds. Better, I learned to play a song on piano more quickly using the limited field of view spectacles in this demo that they had carefully set up. Um, I came home and I tried to install Piano Vision and a whole bunch of other apps. The thing is, they had already had this piano set up for me at their studio. So they'd already done the syncing process, the critical syncing process of making the piano and the keys coming over at the same size. But I look down and it's only about 5 of my fingers that I can see at any one time with the keys overlaid on top of them. If I came home into Vision Pro, or if I came home into Quest 3, the entire keyboard would be augmented right in front of me. I'd look down and see all of my fingers doing their thing with the keys coming down on top of them. The problem facing both the Quest 3, the problem facing the Vision Pro, and the problem facing this is that there needs to be a smarter computer vision algorithm syncing up the keyboard to my finger movements in the headset across all keyboards. It's a software problem facing all of the platforms in front of us. I needed to explain that difference in field of view for all of the VR versus AR people out there. I get that field of view, and it would do the entire keyboard out of a VR headset, and it's going to make that training experience that I had on Snap way, way, way better. But the software on VR still sucks on Vision OS and Quest. It's not good enough to do what it needs to do there. Snap showed me that demo, and it did a really good demo, but it's limited by that field of view.
Yeah, one of the things that makes that possible is that they do have this Snap ML system that allows developers to use custom machine learning models. So they probably are doing a custom computer vision model there to overlay those keys on the keyboard, and that's great. Again, so much of their software approach is beyond anything anyone else has, and I really have to commend them on that.
Robert Quinones is talking about using the phone as a 6-DoF controller.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, sorry, just to keep on field of view for a second. People often wonder, why are we harping on about the field of view of transparent AR? And the demo I always bring up, Ian brings up his piano demo, is the whack-a-mole demo, where I'm using these spectacles and I'm playing whack-a-mole on a table in front of me by just whacking with my hand. And the problem is that because the field of view is so narrow, I can't see the entire whack-a-mole board at once. So I have to either lean back and keep my hand way out here to try and whack the moles, which is really deeply uncomfortable, or I have to rapidly rotate my head like this so that I can, see the entire board over the course of multiple seconds and whack it. Of course, the solution to that could be just to make the board smaller and use fingers instead of hands. But it's just an example of how just deeply compromising this current state of any transparent AR system that can actually be shipped at scale is. And yeah, I was sorry to interrupt you, Ian, but yes, Robert brings up a great point that one of Snap's real advantages here is that through the Snapchat Spectacles companion app, and they say in future, just through having Snapchat, so you won't even have to install a separate app, you can use the phone as a 6-DoF controller. So this doesn't have controllers. You do use hand tracking, you have voice control, but you can bring in your phone as a 6-DoF controller, and they did like a mini golf demo for that. Although weirdly, the mini golf demo was like this portal to a virtual world rather than just being a mini golf on your floor. And the other problem with transparent optics is the transparency, right? So this portal was like a translucent thing. I hated that demo. I thought they should have just kept it simple and made the floor a putting course.
Yeah, and so there's also another class of device that I don't know if we even really outlined here, but there's the media viewer glasses, X-ray glasses, where you just get a big 1080p monitor floating in front of you, and maybe you get it 3-DoF world locked, like so it stays in place when you turn back and forth. Guy Godin is talking about the sides of a movie you're watching getting cut off. And it is maddening, yeah. But there is this whole other category of glasses where, like, you can turn the transparency opaque, turn it black, and then use that as the background for your 1080p movie viewing screen right here, which is it's a cool category of device. Don Hopper uses it. He talks about it in the comments. I've used them, and they're neat. But it's one sliver of what you do with a Vision Pro or a Quest 3, what you do with a VR headset. And again, it's another category separate from this one. So I'm sorry to. I don't think this is derailing us. We really have to keep harping on this again and again.
No, I think it's very on topic. There are so many different glasses out there, and some companies and some analysts are going to use the word AR glasses, the phrase AR glasses, to refer to all of them, but that's really unuseful. So we try to distinguish between them, and we'll talk more about this as we get into this Meta section, because Meta is going to be launching glasses that are all over this spectrum, different glasses that are in these different types. We at UploadVR, and I think it's right to use the term AR glasses to specifically refer to glasses that can place virtual objects into your world, whether that be a Pokemon on your floor or a chessboard on your table, not just a rectangular image in front of your face or a HUD pop-up of your notifications, and actual virtual objects in the world. And that's one of the things about the Snap glasses that is so great. This is true 6DoF AR. They do a lot of things right, but again, the Achilles heel remains that field of view. And I'm sure we'll still see lots of interesting things done with it. It's great to see that students and educators can get it. $50 a month if you're, in a university lab doing research or doing, interesting software engineering is actually pretty reasonable, right? But it's still, you're going to have to, today, if you're building for these kind of glasses, you have to very much so constantly think about the field of view. Like I said with the whack-a-mole demo, you have to make that board smaller so it fits into the field of view, or there are other use cases in which it's just not going to work.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we've done a good job of covering Snap. It's a really interesting platform. I will call it out now as the last see-through platform that's really making a go of it, right? Like we've seen them fall off one after another. Magic Leap didn't, HoloLens didn't make any waves. Magic Leap didn't make any waves, and here is Snap as one of the last transparent see-through optics trying to make a go at it.
Yeah, HoloLens and Magic Leap had some success in enterprise, but there still were, it wasn't wide enough or good enough to really stay adopted. HoloLens 2 is discontinued now. Magic Leap is in this weird position where they aren't going to make another headset. They've kind of become a technology provider. They have that partnership with Google that was we talked about last year. What our understanding and reading of that is that they're going to kind of be like a Zeiss company where they're providing a component for other people's headsets. For Google specifically, for now, they're going to provide like the optics rather than trying to do like a full stack headset anymore. So yeah, right now, Snap is your only real option for like a properly existing and thriving transparent AR system. And even then, if you're not a developer or an educator, you can't actually get one yet.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if any interesting applications come from this sort of half-off offer, renting offer. If any college students actually build something neat with a pair of Snapchat spectacles doing multiplayer with a limited field of view, it's a cool platform to explore something with. It's just that's an enormous amount of money, and I don't know, if I was to pick a dev kit, I would pick a Quest or Vision Pro as your dev kit for the future, not necessarily Snapchat spectacles, but there's plenty of people who are going to try that. We'll see how that goes. Tilt 5 gets no love. Chris Richardson mentions I want Tilt 5 to plug in to the Switch 2, and I am on record with Jerry Ellsworth as rooting for them to make that happen in some way, shape, or form. It's a really, really cool trade-off there with field of view and optics there that they could do some neat toys with.
Yeah, the rise of handheld PCs like Steam Deck and the other competitors from Asus and Lenovo and the likes make Tilt 5 more interesting in that sense. But as we said before, it's a very clever solution to saying, you can't build the kind of AR glasses that people want today. So we'll build around this very, very specific use case of being on a tabletop and engineer around that. From my view, it's still too expensive for the kind of market they're looking for. If they could half the price or even, get the price down by 3 or 4 times and make it standalone somehow with a compute box, then yeah. But they can survive as a niche, right? Not everything has to be a wide product, but it's extremely niche for all of those reasons.
Well, we need to move on through this meta section, and I'm going to encourage David to lump these meta stories together as much as he can creatively possibly manage. I'm trying not to get derailed by the idea that someone in our comments is watching us on delay at 2x speed in order to catch up, and I don't like the idea that they're like time traveling to catch up to us. I do like that idea. It's just it's a little distracting. All right, let's move to the meta section, David.
Sure. So one topic we're going to start with, which is pretty much standalone on its own, is Meta's plan to make Quest scene mesh scans update automatically. So a little bit of context here to start. On Quest, if you have a Quest 3 or Quest 3S, you'll already know this. You can generate a 3D mesh of your room by scanning it in. This is a specific process you have to do. You'll be prompted to do it if you don't already have one, if an app tries to use the scene mesh, or you can just do it when you set up the headset. The problem is that this scene mesh represents a moment in time when you scanned in, right? So if furniture has moved since then, if you've added objects, if you've removed objects, whether it be a pizza box on the table or you had some stuff over here, all of that is still this scene mesh. This scene mesh is that moment in time. If you had a friend in the room who was standing there at the time, their body shape is going to be baked into the scene mesh forever. That's the problem with Quest 3's approach. You can update it, right? You can go in and update it, but that's something you have to manually decide to do. In contrast, Apple Vision Pro and Pico 4 Ultra, we should note, have continuous automatic scene meshing. So there is no setup process. You just, as you walk around the room from the moment you put the headset on, in the background, it is automatically generating a scene mesh and updating it. So when objects are moved or they go away, that scene mesh will slowly kind of update into that position. The app requests the scene mesh and they get what is being built by the headset so far at that time, and they can continuously get updates to it. So the app can adapt to changes in your room. This isn't like real time, this isn't designed for moving objects. It's just designed for you've moved some furniture or something like that. Those headsets are able to do that because they have hardware level depth sensing, right? Pico 4 Ultra and Apple Vision Pro. Apple Vision Pro has its LiDAR. Pico 4 Ultra has its iToF sensor. These are basically sensors that use active hardware level depth sensing of measuring the distance of the kind of view in front of you to generate the scene mesh. In comparison, Quest 3 and Quest 3S use a computational method, right? They are actually just using the two front infrared cameras and running a computer vision algorithm. I'll simplify it for time, stereo disparity. They're checking what is the difference between these two camera views and what does that say about the depth in front of me. And then during this setup process, they're running this computationally expensive algorithm. So it's using CPU and GPU and NPU and battery, and then they generate this mesh. So that's why Meta doesn't have it continuously updating, because it does. If they did, it would take away from the resources of the running app. However, in the latest SDK changelog, they say, we are on a path to remove the user's capability to edit the space settings in 2025, so developers should work to reduce dependency on this feature as it is incompatible with our vision of high reliable scans that just work even when scenes change. So if we're reading that correctly, which I think we are, it suggests that Meta is going to move to a kind of a middle ground approach where you still will have to scan in a scene mesh for each room, so do the hard work of getting the main mesh, but the system will perhaps run a less frequent depth check in the background. And if there are changes to the scene mesh, then it will update that mesh automatically so that you do get these reflected updates to furniture and people baked in. So that's going to make the mixed reality on Quest a lot less janky because, let's be real, a lot of people are just going to scan in their room once, and even if stuff changes or people were baked in and moved, they're not going to bother to update that because it takes time. And so people are getting a kind of subpar experience in mixed reality. Yeah. You would hope that by Quest 4, they have the same thing as Vision Pro and Pico 4 Ultra, where this all just works in the background. There is no scanning process because that gets rid of friction. But if, on the Quest 3 hardware, it sounds like they're not going to be able to get all the way there. But this is still a good middle ground.
There's some really interesting things to think about here. So Laser Dance is the game that we've talked about in the past. We've got really great exclusive coverage on UploadVR.com on this game. But in this game, you set up a point on one side of the room. That's your starting point. You set up a point on a wall on the other end of the room. That's your ending point. And then the game generates a map of lasers that you have to navigate through from point A to point B. You have to dodge the lasers, and you hear the lasers as you're buzzing as you move your head by them. Fantastic experience, but he wasn't able to release the game on Quest headsets in 2024 because this feature wasn't working well enough. Like this needed to be in place for Laser Dance to exist, for it to launch. So hopefully we can have games like that arrive as soon as this feature launches. The question I want to think about, David, is are you suggesting that Meta is going to use more and more of the processor to do more and more computer vision over time? So like there's so many things we need: pet detection, human detection, active objects moving through your space and maybe colliding with you detection, couch detection, keyboard detection. The list goes on and on of things that I need my headset to let me know about in my environment around me. Is performance going to go down on Quest 2s and Quest 3s because the operating system keeps needing to do more of that?
That's a great question. So to start with, Quest 2 doesn't have this ability to generate a scene mesh. You cannot do that on Quest 2 or Quest Pro, so they won't be affected by any changes to this. It's a great question, though. How much overhead is left on Quest, specifically the NPU, the neural processing unit, on Quest 3 to do these things, and how much can be added by making these algorithms more efficient? And if they are running, my guess here is that they will run a much lower rate of mesh scanning in the background. So whereas when you're generating the mesh originally, this is constantly running, every frame. Maybe they do this every 30 frames or something like that, or they kind of spread out the workload so that this isn't designed to like generate one from scratch, but just to notice changes and kind of refine the mesh. It's more scene mesh refinement. That's my guess. But it's a great question you ask, is there NPU overhead left for these other computer vision tasks that you want? So the one object tracking we do have today is keyboard tracking on Quest 3 and Quest 3S. If you have a keyboard in your room, it doesn't even have to be connected. They will notice that keyboard, and if you're in the Quest home environment, they will cut it out with pass-through so you can see any keyboard in reality and your hands on it. So that suggests they do have an object tracking capability there. That is quite literally what they're doing. They're tracking an object. Do they have space for a more general model that could track other objects? On Apple Vision Pro, you have static object tracking already, but this requires baking in a 3D model of that and like training a network on your Mac as a developer that takes, from what I've heard, somewhere between 3 and 9 hours, depending on how geometrically complex that object is. And so people have used that. For example, Apple's example was you could use a globe, right? You track a globe and then you can kind of augment that globe. That's more designed for businesses that know exactly what object they're going to use. But if you had a common household object that everyone had, and I don't mean a generic type of object, I mean it has to be identical, then you could do that too, right? If you had you're talking about keyboards there are manual methods of aligning that the piano version uses, but if you had a specific keyboard model that you knew everyone owned, then you could do that, for example. We'll have to see. We've seen that Meta does add computer vision features over time, right? Quest 1 didn't launch with hand tracking, and then it got hand tracking. Quest 3 didn't launch with body tracking, and then a few months later, it got, inside out upper body tracking. It's a really good question. The question also related, just, and I'll quickly say this, is, will this affect battery life? In apps that are using the scene mesh, if it's pulling in a new refined scene mesh, is that going to affect battery life? We don't know. And the one thing I want to point out is that some of the comments here, not on the show, but on this wider topic that I saw on social media, people seem to think this is out. I want to be crystal clear. This is something Meta said that they have a vision of moving towards in 2025, and we're in January. So this could take months to arrive. It could be knowing Meta's timelines for things, this could be like November 2025 or something. We don't know.
Yeah, it's something they announce in the next Oculus Connect as something they're going to actually deliver next year. Like that's how these I've seen it again and again. Mark Zuckerberg sets aggressive goals for the Meta teams, and sometimes they don't get met, right? Like they just have to miss in one way or another. But he still is going to set these goals, and then it's the mission of everyone on the team to say this is happening. Legs are an example. We go back to Legs. He came out on stage and said, you're getting legs. And it took multiple months and years even to kind of have that asterisk and all of its qualifiers really explained to everyone out there on why the legs aren't actually legs. All right. We ready to talk about the Quest Pro yet?
Yeah, there's one comment I want to bring up from Clay Mann, which I think is a perfect example of why the current approach just isn't good enough. A sit-stand desk. So that's a desk you can adjust its height for sitting or for standing, and that will only be represented at the height that it was set during the scene mesh scan. It's a perfect example of something that just completely will not be working properly with this very static one-time approach. So yeah, unless you have anything else to add there, let's indeed. Sorry.
We're going to come back. Let's think about this or keep this in the back of your mind when we get to the Android XR section later on in the show. They've got Gemini, and they have pitched their Gemini assistant as a core part of their operating system. Start thinking about what Gemini could do along these lines when you go around your environment and get little pop-ups on the objects around you saying, would you like to do something with this object? That's the path we're on with these headsets, and there's a big opportunity for Google to build on that with Android. And we're just at the very, very beginning of this. So let's talk about the Quest Pro next.
Yeah, so according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who is pretty damn reliable when it comes to talking about Meta and Apple's moves in advance, Meta is working on Quest 4 VR goggles, as well as a new high-end model that could eventually become a successor to the Quest Pro. So that is from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman's report. So the first part of that is entirely non-controversial and obvious. Meta executives have spoken about the next Quest multiple times, including like a month ago. So they're working on Quest 4, right? That's pretty obvious. And the information had a report last year purporting to be Meta's roadmap that said that there will be 2 Quest 4 models in 2026. So that's next year, probably late 2026. Presumably that would be a Quest 4S and a Quest 4, mirroring the same strategy of Quest 3 and Quest 3S, right? A budget model and a more premium model. So that part, completely non-controversial. But the next part, a new high-end model that could eventually become a successor to the Quest Pro, is interesting because we've heard about multiple Quest Pro successors in the past. So originally, according to reports from I think both The Verge and The Information, Meta planned a 2024 Quest Pro successor codenamed Funston. So that would have launched last year. It presumably would have used the XR2 Plus Gen 2 that's going to go into the Samsung headset and the Sony headset and all that. And it would have just been a simple, short-term, direct successor to Quest Pro, probably just a spec bump, better chip, better pass-through, all of that. But that was cancelled. That was cancelled according to the reports. Then Meta started spinning up a new potential successor project to Quest Pro, codenamed La Jolla. I finally learned how to pronounce it right, La Jolla. And that was reportedly set for 2027. Again, you had multiple of these very reliable sources pointing to this until last year, Meta reportedly cancelled that in favor of a different 2027 headset, codenamed Puffin. And whereas La Jolla was apparently going to have this same sort of design as Quest Pro, a battery in the rear and a slim front visor with a premium design, Puffin is a very different headset. It is going to reportedly have a tethered battery and compute, both the battery and compute tethered, like Apple Vision Pro, except even more comes off the head, not just the battery. And it's reportedly going to be very lightweight, not even that much more heavy than the Orion glasses, somewhere around 110 grams. So this really lightweight headset, still a mixed reality headset, still, opaque display system with pass-through cameras, but super light and offload as much as you can into this tethered puck. So that's Puffin, okay? So in a discussion with Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth, the journalist Alex Heath from The Verge said that Bosworth essentially confirmed this reporting to him, that Meta had indeed cancelled this style Quest Pro successor for 2027 in favor of a lightweight headset with a tethered puck. That was during Heath's discussion with Bosworth at the Orion demo when he was at Meta for a few days. So he essentially said, yeah, this is what's happening, without giving any specifics or doing any direct, clear confirmation. So that makes Gurman's new reporting really, really puzzling, because this is only a few months later, and now Gurman's referring to a new high-end model to become a Quest Pro successor. So there's two possibilities here. Either Gurman's wording is somewhat confused and he's just referring to Puffin. So he's just, saying Puffin is going to be high-end and basically a Quest Pro successor, even though it's quite a different headset. The other possibility is that in the time since they canceled La Jolla, they have decided to spin up yet another Quest Pro successor that has the same kind of architecture separately to Puffin, so that Puffin would be really focused on, virtual screens, sitting down, having your workspace set up and watching your movies on a plane, whereas this new headset, which we don't even know the code name of, would be this kind of traditional, for enterprise, for work, all in one, put it on your head kind of headset. We don't know which of those two it is.
So I saw a question here saying, where are our high-end third-party Horizon OS headsets? Wonderful question. Where are they? We want them. We've got a subject. We've got about 6 meta subjects here to get to. Zuckerberg teases long-term investments arriving to make Horizon visually stunning. In my mind, Meta needs to do 2 things to push back at Apple. They need to push back at the resolution situation. They need to have headsets that are over the 4K 1080p hurdle that you've discussed, the Apple Vision Pro getting over. It needs to be legitimately better to go into headset to view something traditional, a traditional movie, a traditional content in headset. Meta needs a headset that does that. They also need a lightweight headset. They need to prove that it's super duper lightweight. Those are big things Meta needs to prove. But there's I forgot about the lightweight. Sorry. We need the codec avatars. When I see people talk about high-end headsets, when we talk about, I always think that's the feature that Meta needs to prove, that they're going to offer something that's more open and potentially better than Apple's personas.
Sure. So I think Puffin will likely do both, right? So Puffin, to be clear again, is going to be reportedly, and Meta has essentially confirmed, this really lightweight headset with a tethered puck that is designed for sitting down and using virtual screens, be that for productivity setup, having your triple monitors from your little laptop, or having your enormous virtual cinema screen. And reportedly, it will have eye tracking for a gaze and pinch control system. So Puffin is all that, right? It is high resolution. It is lightweight. If it has eye tracking and it has a good enough chip, theoretically, you can do codec avatars. Maybe it's not, though. Maybe using that tethered puck means that they have to bring the compute down. And maybe Puffin, computing-wise, even though it's coming in 2027, is more on par with something like a Quest 3. So maybe you do need a Quest Pro 2 that has the compute in a place where it can push out all that hot air and, have an XR2 Gen 3, XR2 plus Gen 3 even chip. Maybe that is why they want to have this. Or maybe, as we discussed before, they can do that in Quest 4. Maybe that's a flagship feature of Quest 4. Maybe every Quest 4 headset can do these codec avatars, and you don't need a high-end headset for that. It's a very puzzling situation. When it comes to that question of where are these third-party headsets, we talked about that in the last episode 2 weeks ago, which you can go back and listen to, but there was a leak there that's saying that the Asus Horizon OS headset will have face and eye tracking. So I think they're going to take a while, right? It sounds like we're not going to see that anytime soon, probably late this year at the earliest. You could see, we'll talk soon about what else Meta is going to potentially launch at Connect, but maybe at Meta Connect 2025, you see Asus and Lenovo come out on stage and launch their headsets.
So Ming's saying the only thing that matters to me for controlling the device is if this comes with the neural wristband they've been showing off for years. So we're going to get into these upcoming subjects that will cover the neural wristband, but I do think there's a very good chance that Meta wants to ship the neural wristband to developers to get them started building for all of these things. They need their input system built for the future. They want to get devs building for that input system. I noticed Not Suspicious out there in our audience. That's the developers of Airspace Defender. Go check out our Gamescast and our recent streams where we dive in deep with Airspace Defender. But that is a game that is a perfect fit for the Orion glasses, limited field of view. You've got a full dome in front of you, and then you've got a pitch interface where you click through your interface. It's the perfect type of game for that type of headset as soon as it arrives.
Yeah, the thing is, though, that with the shipping transparent AR headsets, you're not going to see the whole dome at once. It really is that level of field of view, right? Even something like Airspace Defender, you're going to look and see this half of the dome, so you won't see some of the enemy attacks coming in, the missiles coming in from the other side, because you'll be looking at this side. It is that thing where you could probably do it, but you'd have to scale everything down to make everything kind of miniature, which is an interesting idea. When it comes to the neural wristband, as you say, we'll discuss that in more detail soon. And Bloomberg's Mark Gurman has a report about how early we could actually see that coming that we will discuss very, very soon. But I could also see that happening in Puffin, right? I could see them shipping that with Puffin instead of controllers. It sounds like Puffin is going to be this sort of middle ground between headsets and glasses, where it's, from the description, you could almost say it's like goggles. It's going to try to be really, really light and slim, and perhaps not focused on the traditional use cases of Quest headsets, more focused on the screens use cases of Apple Vision Pro.
I'm excited to get to these next few subjects because I think we'll move through them pretty quickly together, the revenue figures here, and then we will talk about a few more things on Meta as we've got a big section here. Then we've got the Mudra link to talk about. We've got the Apple section and the Android section still ahead of us. Hit that like button. Consider becoming a member to support our work directly. Thank you to all of our commenters, regular viewers out there. I saw a couple other people out there are time traveling to catch up to us. So now we know we've got silent viewers out there. We've got people in VR. We've got people in the real world. And now we've got time travelers watching us as well. So that's kind of cool to think about. All right. The Guy Godin, the whole work in VR promise again. It never works. Guy, I don't understand you, Guy. How can you make virtual desktop and also laugh at the premise of work in VR? How explain it to me? All right, David, let's move on.
You can't just bring that up as a side tangent. There are people who work in this today. The ability to have whatever size monitors wherever you want, as many as you want, is immensely valuable. The issue today is that affordable headsets don't have the resolution, and the headset that does have the resolution, despite its price, is far too heavy. So yes, people don't do it today, because to do it, you need a $3,500 headset to make the resolution practical, and the $3,500 headset is 600 grams and hurts your face. But all you have to do is imagine this feature where, what if it's not expensive and what if it's not heavy? And if you put those two things together, you can see a lot of people doing this, right? It's instead of going on a plane and hunching over your little 13-inch laptop and letting the person beside you in every other aisle see what you're doing, you just lean back, have your triple monitor set up or your ultra wide or whatever you want, and have your workspace. But yeah, no tangents.
no, it's Guy Godin's. I'm blaming Guy. Okay, I'm not taking. All right, let's move on, David. Let's get to these Meta revenue subjects because this is the one that we had Blair on a call for. Blair, do you remember being tuned in last year and placing a bet with us? Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, so the context here is that Meta Reality Labs, the division of Meta behind Quest, Ray-Ban glasses, and the research and development of AR glasses and the SCMG Wirstband that we often talk about, that division of Meta has recorded its highest ever quarterly revenue. You can see here 1.08 billion of revenue, which is slightly higher than last year's revenue, Quest 3's launch period of 1.07. So Quest 3 is obviously a more expensive headset. It was $500 to $650 when it launched, so you need fewer units of it to get the same revenue as a cheaper headset, Quest 3S, which is $300, and they had those kind of discounts on it around holiday period. So you can see that Quest 3S's launch has propelled Reality Labs to this record quarterly revenue. The bet Ian is referring to is, I don't think it's a formal bet, but it was just kind of an informal bet with our frequent listener, viewer here, Blair Anticleric, the developer of the upcoming VR game Lo-Fi, who bet that this would be the high point and that this season Quest 3S would kind of flop and we would see lower revenue than last holiday season. To be clear here in this chart, these quarters are colored because obviously in the holiday season, Q4, you're going to see the highest sales, right? People are buying things for Christmas presents. People in winter have more time to spend indoors. They take time off work. This is the time where consoles and other devices like this always see their highest sales. So you compare quarter to quarter rather than like comparing last quarter. But if you look in 2024, it had already had each of these first three quarters, Q1, Q2, and Q3, be higher than in 2023. So you see this kind of Quest 3 effect. And then now we're seeing the first effects of Quest 3S. And it will be very, very interesting to see throughout 2025 what happens. Is this a one-off? Was Quest 3S just the hot Christmas present for 2024? Or is there momentum here? Can they keep selling these things outside of the holiday season and keep bringing in revenue? And so this is kind of the good news for Meta's perspective from Reality Labs. The sort of bad news, or depending on how you want to contextualize it, is that they also recorded record costs. So this graph shows the revenue here as before, but it also shows how much the Reality Labs business unit spent. Now, one really important thing to note here, though, is that this is not majority Quest. In fact, as of 2022, more than half of this spending was on the research and development of AR glasses, this moonshot project. We cannot understate just how much spending is going into developing AR glasses. The Orion hardware prototype is a miracle of engineering and material science. It is truly a Manhattan Project scale thing to try to bring into life. I often say that trying to build true AR glasses of the kind that people really want in the 2020s is like trying to build an iPhone in the 1990s. We are just not there yet, but if you really throw all the king's horses and all the king's men and the money of a company like Meta at this problem, you can kind of come up with a prototype that you can't really mass produce. So that's really, really important to note, that a huge amount of this spending is on AR glasses. If you took that away, I suspect the Quest unit would still be unprofitable. But the other thing to note then is that this is still very early. XR headsets like Quest are still far from maturity. There are still so much low-hanging fruit to attack here. Mark Zuckerberg has indicated for many years now to investors in these earnings calls that Reality Labs is about building the next computing platform and being one of those platforms for the next wave of computing. And he expects the actual returns here to arrive in the 2030s. And a way I thought of this earlier today is, imagine you offered a tech company today that isn't Apple or Google the opportunity to go back in time and change something so that they would own iOS or Android. How much would they spend for that one use of this time machine? And I think the answer is hundreds of billions. To own a computing platform that is dominant like that is invaluable, maybe even trillions. And so that kind of explains why are they throwing all this money at this. When it comes to this sort of, there's so much focus in the mainstream media about the loss here, because yes, technically they spend more than they make by a huge amount, so it's a massive loss, right? But if most of that spending is on products that haven't even launched yet, that's really describable as an investment. The real measure of this, whether this can become a business profitable, is later in this decade when they do launch AR glasses, and this is no longer just an R&D project, it's a real product line. how do we see these bars move then? Can they actually make a profitable business out of Quest headsets and smart glasses and HUD glasses and AR glasses? Then is the time for analyzing the costs and benefits, in my opinion.
So Anti-Cleric saying the Quest is probably still unprofitable, but you win the bet? Yes.
So you can't move the goalposts. You didn't say that you thought that the costs would decrease or anything. You said that this bar will be smaller than this bar, and it was not. And I look, this isn't right. It's a silly, informal bet. Let's not go crazy about it, but don't move the goalposts is all I'm going to say.
All right. I love that. All right. So yeah, hit the like button on this. Thank you, Mindweaver, for always cheerleading us out there. I was going to ask Blair out there if you can handle this joke on you. How many lo-fis could be funded by the rise in funding in revenue from Q4 2023 to Q4 2024? I saw some people asking whether the Ray-Ban glasses are trying to understand whether the Ray-Ban glasses are reflected in these revenue numbers at all. Do you have any answer to that, David?
So we don't know what the revenue sharing basis is between EssilorLuxottica and Meta, right? These are, a lot of people call these the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, but they're actually the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. As a hardware product, these are made and sold by EssilorLuxottica. Yes, Meta also sells them through their website, but as a retailer. So we don't know what that split down is. I would love to know, right? What is the agreement between Meta and EssilorLuxottica? Who gets the money when you buy a pair of Ray-Ban glasses? We don't know this. We genuinely don't know. As far as I'm aware, nobody that has said anything in public does know. But the argument that some people make is, oh, this wasn't Quest 3S, it was the Ray-Ban glasses. Well, the question I would ask then is, if the Ray-Ban glasses are doing all this, then why didn't they happen here? The Ray-Ban glasses came out last year. They didn't come out last month. There wasn't like a new model or something. They're just selling the same old thing as last year. The one thing that does change in this quarter is the Quest 3S launches. And so it's really hard to make an argument that if you look at the difference between these 2 years, the Ray-Ban glasses launched here, somehow you would have to argue that this entire increase here is also from the Ray-Ban glasses. So Quest 3 sold nothing at all. And then Quest 3S also sold barely anything. It doesn't match up from what we've seen. The two other data points that we talked about in shows earlier in the month is that on Amazon US, the top selling console in 2024 was Quest 3S. So where did all that revenue go? The other thing is on Christmas Day 2024, in this quarter, the Meta Horizon app, which is required to set up Quest headsets, was the #1 free iPhone app. That's not an analyst estimate. That's not something Meta said. That is Apple. Apple has said that in their ranking of iPhone apps. You're muted, Ian.
The cost chart is overwhelming. It's wild to see how big that red chart is. And you noted in your article that there wasn't this note for the first time that they didn't say that was going to get bigger next quarter for the first time, right?
So they didn't in the general statement and in the press release, which is interesting. But there was an analyst question, which I do want to read out because this is very, very illuminating. So in the follow-up call later on, an analyst from some sort of finance research firm, an equity research firm, asked about Reality Labs spending. Someone asked at least every earnings call, and I always listen, but they answered very differently this time. So this is Meta's CFO, Susan Lee, said that there are big product bets we're making, and there's sort of a deep technological set of challenges that we know we need to unlock in order to be able to bring scalable consumer products to market. So she actually said to this analyst, not in the press release, which is strange because it was in every other press release, but to this analyst, that Reality Labs losses will continue to increase in 2025. So they're saying that this is going to get worse because they're still investing in this. And interestingly, she noted that one of the new causes of these losses increasing was that they would be spending heavily on scaling smart glasses. We'll talk really, really soon about those smart glasses. But it looks like, from what we've heard from earlier reports, that they're going to try to slowly scale down the spending on headsets and try to turn that into a profitable business, because we're still really, really, really early. It sounds crazy to say that, and some people may wonder, like, are we crazy here? But like, on the grand scheme of things, if you look at technology on a multi-decade scale, we are still in the earliest days of XR headsets. There have only been standalone XR headsets with 6DoF tracking and 6DoF input for 6 years. That's very, very small, right? If you talk about personal computers, where were personal computers at 6 years in, right? That would be in the 1980s. Where were consoles in? That would be, in like the same sort of scale. Where were pocket computers of any kind, right? If you want to call PDAs, people like to define the smartphone as starting with the iPhone, but it was really just an advancement of pocket computers, which had been a thing since the 1990s. So we're still really, really early. You can see that from the statement. They're saying that, like, there are still fundamental technologies here that need to be brought into market to even make these things fundamental. We talk about this all the time, right? Every headset in the future is going to have eye tracking. Quest headsets don't even have eye tracking yet. Every headset is going to have the ability eventually to do these photorealistic avatars. The pass-through today is like grainy and low resolution. It's going to get really, really sharp. You're going to be able to read text and do things without taking off the headset more and more. More and more of the time, when you want to take a sip of your drink, or you want to go and check something and take something out of your drawer, or whatever you need to do, you're just going to double tap or press the button on the headset and keep doing that. All of these things are going to dramatically change over time. The weight is going to get a lot lighter, right? We still have these 500 grams bricks on our faces. This is going to look comical. We're going to laugh at the headsets we have today in 10 years' time. All of these things are going to improve. This is still a really, really, really early stage of the industry on the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, this is fascinating. So there's a question out there from LL. David, I want you to think about it while I try to answer, because I've been thinking about it for a minute here. Have David or Ian made predictions for what they think these bars will look like 5 years from now? So the answer to that is no, we haven't made those predictions. So I've been thinking about it as you've been talking, David, and I have no idea, right? Like, it's so weird to think about, but they've got a problem here, which is that they're investing both in AR and in VR. They've got teams doing both of these technologies at once, and it's costing them extraordinary amounts of money. How do you go and get a whole bunch of games made for VR headsets and games made for AR headsets and headsets made for both? I don't know. You offload costs. So they have to find ways to offload costs to partners, to remove costs from their own their own thing. So reducing that red bar makes sense, but I don't know how they increase the green bar revenue. They increase by people, right? By just,
Yeah.
instead of 10 million people, they get to 100 million people.
Yeah,
That all through the store revenue? Does the store revenue really pay that off? Do we get to? So we're seeing 1 billion a quarter versus, what was it, 6 billion a quarter in costs, roughly. So
that's the highest. These are the highest figures we see, right? They get lower on both sides for when you go to different quarters. I mean, I think the thing is here, you scale the business, as they're saying, right? The thing about technology curves is that we know is that once these do start to, like, take off, they become exponential, right? So you could see the difficulty about making predictions about this is that you would have to ignore competition. If we go to a pretend imaginary world where Meta is the only company selling headsets and the only company selling glasses, we probably could make predictions here. But what you can never factor in is how is the competition going to affect this. The counter to that is that this isn't zero sum, right? The number of people who have never bought a headset or smart glasses today is vastly greater than the one they're competing with. They're not, the market will grow and multiple companies will grow into this massive space. Today, this is, the headset market is maybe like 30 million people. The smart glasses is a couple of million. There are hundreds of millions of consumers that buy laptops and tablets, and there are billions of people who buy smartphones and smartwatches, right? So depending on the scale you get to here, these numbers could look like very sort of small fry numbers on the grand scheme of things. So if you do imagine Quest 4 taking off significantly. If they are able to get this thing, it's sleeker, it's lighter, the pass-through is a lot better. You get the virtual screens use case start to take off. They have Netflix and Disney Plus and Prime Video and things like that. And you want to take it on a plane. And so they basically do what Apple Vision Pro does with, eye tracking and hand control, but for $500, you then maybe start to see these graphs go very quickly. To put it another way, right? If they can kind of you do need to think about these things as multiples, right? You grow the business by 4x and you cut costs by half, and you now have this as profitable, right? So I think we're far too early to say this. They've only even been breaking out these results since 2020. We need to look at this on a decade scale to really know.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. So it's the hardest thing for us, for any analyst. Like that's why the analysts get paid big bucks, because they do make those predictions pretty regularly. When we're making it pretty clear to you, we're having to guesstimate the lift of a exponential curve, and it's very, very, very hard. What I would love to see is inside the revenue, and they don't do this, is what is the breakdown of that revenue? How much is smart glasses? How much is Quest Plus subscription revenue? How much is Quest Store revenue? And how much is Quest headset sales? And how much is what other things might come in? We need to know that to really make a guess as to like what I expect to happen on that chart is a couple of those categories are going to go down to zero, while other categories are going to become like 90% of the revenue, right? Like it's going to become a large percentage. A couple parts of their business are going to become a large percentage of their revenue in VR and AR.
Yeah, that's the leak I want to see, right? We did have a leak a few hours before this data came out, and it showed, according to this memo that was sent to all Reality Labs employees, they had increased their sales by 40%. Based on this, as in 40% higher in 2024 than in 2023. Based on this data, it sounds like that was unit sales. So they're talking about like they sold 40% more units of hardware than they did the year before. It'd be very interesting to see a breakdown. I want to see that. There are lots of companies that obscure this stuff, unfortunately, though. Apple, with their Vision Pro, they have it, categorized in the same wearables category as AirPods and Apple Watches, I'm pretty sure. So you're not going to get that there. It would be very, very interesting to see that data, though. I, for one, want to see it.
TMS saying, has anyone considered the possibility that people are just not into XR, VR, or any headset wearable as a medium? Oh, I hate the reverse of that question, because you're missing the lore of why someone would want to put on a headset. It's not like you don't go, I want to put on a headset. You go, oh, I actually want to get my work done a little bit more quickly in headset. And legitimately, with an ultra wide and multiple displays, you don't realize until you've done it how constrained your thought has been by the 12-inch laptop screen that you've been using for all of your work. You can only ever single task on that little 12-inch monitor right in front of you. You have to look at each tab and tab into each and every single task. Getting two windows on a 12-inch monitor is a joke. It's a farce. It's a lie told to us by the wrong people in charge of these companies. Now you get a giant ultra wide and you pull up 5 windows over here, 5 windows over here, and you know exactly where each piece of information is in your array. You look at your text down here and you look at the data over here and you compare, you copy and paste, pull this stuff down. It makes legitimate sense and saves time to do that. But you don't sit there going, I wanna wear a headset. You go, actually, it's going to save me time to put on a headset and do this with a headset today.
Yeah, so to directly address the question, of course it's possible, right? We're not time travelers. It's entirely possible. But what we argue here very specifically is that it is a fallacy to say because most people don't want the headsets of today, they don't want headsets. In the same way that if you went to the 1980s and said, well, most people don't want personal computers, so people don't want personal computers, right? Or if you went to the early 1990s and said, well, most people don't want mobile phones, cell phones, as you call them in the US, therefore most people don't want cell phones. Our argument is that this is still such an early technology. There's so much low-hanging fruit to clock off the experience is going to get so much better over time that the complaints of today will not be valid in 5 or 10 years. So that's the issue, right? As we say over and over, these headsets are too heavy, they're too uncomfortable. The affordable ones are too low resolution. The software ecosystem is still very primitive. All of these issues exist, but they're not fundamental. It is entirely possible to build slim and light headsets.
See-through, low field of view optic AR, that might be fundamental. That we're still like, yes, we've seen get to 70 degrees, but it costs $10,000. So there might be fundamental issues with that architecture. That's unproven. David's, again, the thing we have to harp on again and again and again, it's not fundamental. What David's describing there is all solvable. It's already been solved in current hardware in different ways, right? Big Screen Beyond is $1,000 by a startup. Wait till someone the size of Apple decides to ship a headset that's that small. We need to move on and get through this episode as quickly as we can now. But Brandon Jones out there in our comments has just become the third time traveler we've had during this show, catching up to us, trying to get back to the present. And apparently this is going to be a recurring thing we're going to have to do. We've already had 3 time travelers in this episode. I feel bad for you having to listen to me speak that fast. Goodness.
Yeah, we do want to move on. The last thing I want to say is that one of my personal interests that I love to read about, and I spend a lot of time reading about and listening and watching old archive footage of, is exactly this: the consumer attitudes to adoptions of new technology. It's one of the reasons I'm interested in this. I just find it fascinating. And a lot of this are just echoes throughout history. I watched discussions from the late 1970s of a TV host hosting 2 people to argue the sides of will the average person ever own a personal computer. People in the early 1980s arguing that these personal audio devices like the Sony Walkman won't take off because people won't want to wear something on their ears. You're not going to want to cover your ears. A lot of these ideas. Now, these don't mean that VR and AR are going to be super duper popular and take off, right? But they do mean that all of the current arguments against them are clearly deeply flawed and have the same echoes of the arguments against these other technologies. And I find this fascinating because you can have almost the same discussion 4 decades separated just about different technologies.
Yeah, stop comparing VR to things with utility, lol. All right.
I mean, sorry, let me redress that. So the one of the things that people said in that exact discussion about personal computers is, what would anyone ever want them for? They don't have any utility. I'm sure you can use them for, processing some industrial factory, or I guess you could put a spreadsheet on there. And even some of these discussions were before spreadsheets. But what would a person ever want for them? The computers don't have any utility for the average person.
If I had a chart that had the number of cars in the world and the number of physical displays in the world, I would love to see that chart in comparison to the number of VR headsets in the world. And we're making the case here that over the course of this century, I think the number of cars is going to diminish, or at least the number of individually owned cars is going to diminish, and the number of physical TVs is going to diminish, and the number of VR headsets is going to rise. We could be wrong. That's the big thesis of this industry, ultimately. But what David points out, is the road to people buying a headset instead of a TV, instead of a tablet, instead of a personal computer. It's right in front of us. It's happening right now, and all the pieces are laid down. It's just held down by weight and resolution and all these solvable problems that are just too expensive for most of you to find appealing right now. Give it 2 more years, 3 more years, and all of these problems get solved one after another after another.
Yeah, it's a very spicy take. Some people are always going to disagree and hate. We'll just have to see, right? I mean, we do not to harp back to the bet, but you even had for this quarter in this very specific sense, people saying, no, this 2023 fourth quarter, that was an anomaly. It's going to be way smaller in the other one, and that doesn't pan out. So we'll have to see. I don't know about the cars thing. I think that's a you thing. I want to just disconnect. I think these things are additive. I don't I think you still maybe want to own a car.
Why do I want to own a car when they drive themselves?
I mean, sure, okay, that's a separate thing. Yeah, if you're in a city, where you have robo taxis, but people who live out in the countryside, maybe that's
all right. We'll argue that another week. All right.
Let's. It's very tangential.
We'll get into that with Google. I still want my Google time machine, right? Where I get into the Google car and I look out the windows of the cars it's driving by, and I get Google Earth, but reskinned for the 1900s. Like, come on, if Google, please. I think I've got Google people out there in the audience. Do it. Come on, I want to get into your robo taxi in a VR headset and have a time machine. You can do it. I believe in you. All right, let's move on, David.
Yeah, that's definitely not a tangent at all. Okay, we're going to talk about smart glasses now. Well, glasses of all sorts. So remember we talked about the different types. So today we have the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, and these do not even have a display of any kind other than the little white LED in your right eye that tells you when you're recording or when the AI is listening. We talked about the success of Quest 3S, but these things seem to be a huge success too. We reported back at the end of the year or start of this year that these things were the most popular product in Ray-Ban stores in Europe and the Middle East. And now Meta looks like they want to really take this in to the next level. So to start with these current Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, they are going to start a major marketing campaign that includes celebrities, starting with a Super Bowl ad or two Super Bowl ad that has the two Chris's as a promoting the product, Chris Pratt and Chris Hemsworth. So we haven't seen Meta do celebrity marketing for a long time. Back in the Oculus Go era, they did it, but we can have a tangent about that another day. The headsets were clearly not ready there. Oculus Go was flawed in many ways. The software was flawed, but they did back then have this marketing campaign with some pretty big celebrities that field. So they feel now that smart glasses are a good product. They have added a bunch of features since they launched these things. Meta AI has gotten so many more capabilities. You can record for like 2 minutes now instead of 30 seconds. You can do live translation, reminders, QR code scanning. All of these things have been added. They have new styles. So that's the kind of immediate term. They're going to start really ramping up the marketing on that. And you could kind of see that referenced in Meta's CFO's comments during the earnings call. But what about in the kind of medium term? What's coming next for this kind of glasses category? Well, according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, the first thing they're going to do is launch a Oakley version of this. So it's the same concept as the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, still no display, and they're going to put apparently the camera in the middle. So to be clear, this is just an image of the regular Oakley glasses, but they'll start marketing this thing, according to Mark Gurman, towards athletes, be it, skiing, cycling, anything where you want to have a little bit more kind of protection from the elements and a style that's more appropriate to these sort of sports, while still capturing first-person footage and having your Meta AI assistant and voice reading out all of your kind of notifications. So these are reportedly launching in late 2025 this year. But do you have something you want to say on that?
Well, Free Sky just saying they need some sort of display in the Meta Ray-Bans ASAP. We're going to discuss some of that soon.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. So according to multiple sources now, I think 3 different sources, you have like the Financial Times, The Information, The Verge. Basically, all the reliable sources are saying that Meta is going to launch a HUD glasses this year. So there's the conflicting reports around this are around will these HUD glasses be Ray-Ban branded or will they be Meta branded? So will these be like the Ray-Ban Meta Plus glasses or will they just be the Meta glasses? We don't know that yet. It's unclear. What we do know about this is that reportedly it will have a heads-up display in one eye. So you're talking about a field of view of somewhere between 20 and 30 degrees. So this isn't AR, but it would have your phone's notifications. It would read out text from Meta AI. So instead of having to hear that thing yapping in your ear when you ask it something, you just get a little text response that you can read while you're going about your daily life. It would also have other use cases such as having a viewfinder. So you can see a little small version of the photo you're about to take or the video you're about to take to frame it. You can, see a preview of what did that photo just look like after you've taken it. Essentially, as Guy Godin says, Google Glass, but in a more sleek form factor. So you don't look like a Borg like Google Glass made you look. You would have something that is apparently going to be a little bit heavier and bulkier than the Ray-Ban glasses, but not crazily. According to the reports, the current Ray-Ban Meta glasses, these things which do not have a display, are 50 grams, and apparently these Meta HUD glasses are going to be around 70 grams. So you're talking a little bit heavier. There was reporting that EssilorLuxottica, the company that owns Ray-Ban, originally balked at the thickness that had to be added to the side of the glasses to get this display in. So they initially said, no, we do not want this to be Ray-Ban branded, make this a Meta product. But then recently we have other reports saying that it will actually be a Ray-Ban branded product. And that came just a month or two after Meta took a 5% stake in EssilorLuxottica, and they renewed their partnership into the 2030s. So who knows? Either these things are going to come out as Ray-Ban Meta Plus glasses, or they're going to be just Meta glasses. Mark Gurman has some interesting details, though, that are new, and that's what we want to talk about here. So these HUD glasses we're talking about, they, smart glasses with a monocular heads-up display, will apparently cost $1,000, according to Gurman, and may be the first Meta product to introduce the neural wristband. So you would have this, presumably a case that has both, that's a lot bigger than this, where you have your wristband for control and your heads-up display for input. So if you're unfamiliar with the wristband, it senses the electrical signals that activate muscles in your wrist in order to track your fingers. So without any camera seeing your fingers, you get finger tracking. And this can be used for interfaces. This is the prototype they showed off of the Orion glasses. So this thing would just sit around your wrist, and then you can use your thumb as a D-pad, or you can click your thumb to your hand as a clicker. And this can be done while your hand's in your pocket, right? You could be sitting on a bus or a train wearing a heavy jacket, and your hand is literally inside your jacket pocket, and you're using your little subtle micro gestures on your fingers to control an interface as if you had a virtual D-pad. So we actually have an image back here from maybe 18 months ago now of Meta's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, showing to I think the CEO of EssilorLuxottica, or it may just be Luxottica, a old prototype of this. So you can see that as far back as 18 months ago, they were talking about this. This was being demoed, and it may debut on these HUD glasses later this year for $1,000. And that would be the glasses plus the band, $1,000.
So I'm seeing some people ask about battery life out there. The silly thing, and the reason Meta is doing this so aggressively and so quickly, is battery life can vary dramatically depending on the weather. You can also have the thing shut down on you if it's too cold out, or if it's too hot out. You can have these glasses just suddenly not work on you. That's all valuable data that Meta needs to have in order to make the next gen a little bit more resilient for all of those use cases. And then you add on the neural interface as this fundamental new interaction model. We start piecing all of this together in competition to the Apple Watch and the Samsung Watch that are out there. We're going to have Meta versions of those. I've got this bag that I've got set up that I want to do this example of, where I've got the Ray-Ban glasses, sunglasses, the ones that are not transitions, just full outside view lenses. Got them in their case, and they go inside of a bag. And then I've got the Quest 3 or Quest 3S that goes inside of the bag. And then I've got the Tap XR band that goes on my wrist, and it does some of the similar sort of idea. It's a different technology, but you can tap out a whole keyboard with different tap commands using this. In that bag, the headset, the glasses, and the band, I have the computing system of the future that Meta believes it's building, right? Like that is what they're building toward. Headset, glasses, band. You combine those three, and that is what Meta has been building toward for the last decade. And this band, and now we're getting to this like testing place where they're going to test out every type of glasses to figure out what's the best type of glasses to combine with the band.
Yeah, so that is a very key to note that there's going to be a lot of different types of glasses coming from Meta in the coming years, right? So the really important thing to understand is these aren't successors. These are going to be different tiers. So according to what Mark Zuckerberg's indicated, they're still going to be selling these traditional uh, AI glasses, as they call them, or just smart glasses for, starting at $300, right? So you don't get your display, you don't have a wristband, it's just glasses. You have the Meta AI on them, you have camera capture. We have that today. The Meta AI will get better and better over time so that it can do more and more things and be smarter and smarter about understanding your environment through the camera. Then you have this middle tier that we're talking about now that, according to Mark Gurman, is going to be around $1,000. And it's going to be these HUD glasses, right? So you get all of those capabilities of the basic glasses, but now you have the display for those things. And there's other things you can imagine using that display for, right? You could have, when you're on a video call with someone, today, if you're video calling someone from your Ray-Ban Meta glasses, they see your first-person view through your camera on your glasses, but you don't see anything. You could imagine potentially these glasses show, again, it's only a 20 or 30 degree field of view, but it would still be cool to see the view of the other person, right? So they're on their phone and you can see their view while you're video calling. You could maybe imagine even some sort of phone mirroring or some sort of like basic ability to watch videos somehow. I'm sure there'll be a lot of exploration around that. So that reportedly around $1,000. To me, that sounds pretty high. Actually, I would have expected something like 600 to 800, but we'll see. And then, as we'll talk about next, I think, once we're ready to move on, eventually, reportedly from 2027, you get AR glasses, and then you go even bulkier still, maybe 20 to 40 to 50 grams more. We'll have to see, and then you get binocular display, a wider field of view, and the ability to actually not just have a little heads-up display, but position virtual objects in your space. And it will still apparently use the same neural wristband as the input technology, as well as obviously hand tracking. But that that could be $2,000 or more. We don't know.
We're getting close to that Google section for those of you that have been waiting for it. For those of you that are done with Google and never want to hear about them again, we've got that Google section coming up. And so you can hate as much as you want, or you can love them as much as you want as we talk about that, because we've got some very interesting Google news that I think is going to change some minds. So just want to remind everyone that that's coming up here. Hit that like button, and let's get through these last few bits of Meta news, because I'm tired of talking about Meta. Let's another.
Sometimes it is frustrating that we come into these shows and there is only Meta to talk about. But I imagine if you were an electric car news website 10 years ago, you would spend all your day talking about Tesla, right? It's just how it is when you have like a first market mover. So we talked about basic smart glasses, or AI glasses as Meta calls them. We've talked about HUD glasses, and now we're going to talk about that third tier, AR glasses. So we all saw the Meta Orion prototype. Here it is, of true augmented reality glasses in glasses form factor, offloading the compute to a puck using that same neural wristband for input. And the Orion breakthrough was that these things have a 70-degree horizontal field of view. So it's still nowhere near what you get in like a Quest 3 or Vision Pro, where 70 degrees diagonal field of view. So it's still nowhere near what you get in a Vision Pro or Quest, where it's like 120, 130 diagonal. But it's a lot better than everything else that was in glasses form factor, right? We talked about how the Snap spectacles earlier in the show have 46-degree diagonal. So all of these virtual objects are getting cut off, right? You have to really look at something for it to exist. Object permanence does not exist at all, pretty much, with the Snap spectacles, unless it's right in front of you and relatively small. With the Orion glasses, that's the breakthrough, right? You look around, and objects have more permanence. You're still going to get object cut off, right? You're still going to have the issue where you're not going to see stuff out here, and you're not going to see stuff even at the very edge of the periphery, but it's going to be a lot better. And it sounds like they've, with Orion, passed the threshold where it no longer becomes a kind of crippling Achilles heel, the field of view. The problem, as I have said many times in this show, as UploadVR has been one of the only to point out, is that Orion is not the product that Meta is going to ship. Orion is a prototype, and it relies on silicon carbide lenses to get that field of view. And you cannot, according to Meta's own admission, this isn't a conspiracy theory, Meta fully admits, you cannot mass produce silicon carbide lenses. So they are working on an AR glasses product codenamed Artemis for 2027. And the problem with Artemis is that while it will be better than Orion in some ways, in particular, they say they're going to make it, sleeker. These frames are going to get thinner. This is going to get thinner. It's all going to look a bit more sleek, a little less, to use a derogatory term, like geeky, right? They're going to look more like regular glasses. However, there's going to be a sacrifice, and that's to the field of view. Now, there was a journalist, the information's Wayne Ma, who actually talked about Orion a year before Meta released it, or Meta revealed it. And Ma had Orion pretty much exactly described. Every part of this was pretty much exactly what Wayne Ma described it as being. And in that report, he also talked about Artemis. So this is, a year before Orion. And he said that Artemis is going to have a field of view of somewhere on the order of 50 degrees diagonal. So if that is true, if Wayne Ma's suggestion is true, then the first AR glasses product from Meta will not have the breakthrough of Orion. It will not have it. It will be the same issue that we've seen from every transparent AR optic system in glasses form factor for the past 10 years. The field of view just won't be good enough. Now, it is possible that Ma was wrong, or that Meta finds another way to get 60 degree maybe instead of 70. Even then, it's not going to be the 70. Meta has fully admitted that these silicon carbide lenses are not coming in the consumer product. That's the issue. However, the news today is not that. That was just the context. The news today is that Meta will reportedly offer Orion, as it is, not Artemis, but Orion, more widely to developers next year, 2026. So what we do know is that right now they are seeding some of these things out to very select developers. We don't know yet, but I imagine we're talking about this is complete speculation on specifics, but companies like Disney, something like that, right? They're giving these out to giants and saying, look at this. Why don't you give some of your content people with your cool IPs a little look at this and just put it in one of your labs, right? Disney has labs, Adobe has labs. These kind of companies have these like kind of research divisions. Meta is apparently, from what I've heard, giving some of these Orion units out to these companies and saying, take a look at this and see what you can do. But according to Gurman, next year in 2026, they're going to have a more widespread program where they start giving these things out. It's still going to be very select because they can only make on the order of 1,000 of these things. They're not going to make, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. But it looks like next year developers, maybe some of our favorite developers from the Quest world, are going to start to get their hands on this to think about what can we build in this new medium.
And I just saw, a picture of 7 Vision Pro headsets being dropped on the director of the new Wicked film. So they're in the editing bay putting together Wicked 2 for later this year. And they're going to be doing all their editing, or some of their editing for that film in Vision Pro headsets, a whole team in Vision Pro talking about how they're going to do it. So we'll be listening to the director's commentary later this year or early next year for the second Wicked movie, and hearing how they integrated VR into their production workflow this year right now. Meanwhile, Meta is trying to spin up and figure out what people would want to make for these things. And the thing that David and I discuss is what happens when you get an executive that goes and puts on one of these at 70 degrees of field of view and makes a handshake agreement with Mark Zuckerberg or Andrew Bosworth at Meta and says, okay, we're gonna take $10 million from you, Meta, and we're going to make an app for these glasses. And then you go tell your devs, hey devs, you have a job for the next 2 years building an app for these Meta glasses. And then they hand you the first actual production working model of the glasses that you're going to ship on. And they're far smaller field of view than the glasses that your CEO put on. And they're a smaller field of view than the things you've been playing with for a few months. What happens to your game design? Do you still finish it? Like, is it still a good game if you reduce the field of view that much? So that's what we wonder is like what's going to happen here? Are devs actually going to build interesting things for this limited field of view, or are they going to get frustrated halfway through? Is it going to have a little bit of both? And I just had to contrast that with Vision Pro being useful today for certain tasks.
I think that is an excellent point and a dynamic that Meta is really going to struggle with. We've said on this show before how even showing Orion has massive, massive downsides, right? Meta has set extremely unrealistic expectations for the entire industry, right? We'll talk about this soon with Samsung and Google's headset, but you come along with a cool headset now, and people are going, why is it a headset? Meta's got glasses, surely. Meta said that you can do this all in glasses. I saw the Orion prototype. What are you trying to release a headset for, right? Unfortunately, that is the normie response to some headsets now, and that is going to be a huge issue because as we keep harping on about, I'm sorry to harp on about it, but it needs to be said because it's just not getting into the public consciousness. These are a fantasy. Meta has described it as a time machine that lets us live in the future. This cannot be made as a product anytime soon. So, we have a question here from Siegfried Greding, sorry. Will they ever fix the field of view? So are they showing off a product's ability that will never make it to consumers? It's not about never, right? It seems likely that we will eventually find that there will eventually be material science breakthroughs or a ability to mass produce silicon carbide. And there are issues with silicon carbide around actually export controls because it's actually used in like some military systems like radars. But say it's not about ever, but it's about anytime soon. I would be shocked if they don't. Sorry, just to finish the thought. I would be shocked if they don't solve this by sometime in the 2030s. But I really do think that's the time frame we're talking about. For the rest of this decade, the 2020s, what we're going to see is pass-through mixed reality headsets are going to get sleeker and lighter, and the pass-through is going to get better and better. Meanwhile, we're going to see AR glasses that are inferior to Orion, and that's going to cause a big break in a lot of people's mental models. As I said in my article about this, incredible mixed reality headsets will arrive before acceptable AR glasses.
So can you put the camera on me for a second, David? This is my field of view horizontally in the Quest 3. So this is pretty average, right? Like I can, this is where it goes horizontally, and this is what it is in most headsets. Is this is where it goes out on this shape. What on Apple Vision Pro they have this external display. And the external display recreates the look of your eyes. It tries to recreate and make you believe that you're actually looking at a person's eyes. It looks like crap. It doesn't look like a person's eyes. It looks like they're cloudy. It doesn't. It looks a little fake. It doesn't even look like you're looking through the lenses of glasses at these eyes. It just looks a little bit off. But the question that I really struggle with is like, imagine you've got the full visor on the Oakley things earlier, and you've got a much better version of the external eyesight display such that you really can't tell that you're actually looking at fake eyes. What happens then if you can't tell you're looking at fake eyes and you're actually getting a view of like underneath the lens at them? What else also, if the field of view is out here as wide as it is, what happens if you have an open periphery out beyond this horizontal limit, and it's just open periphery out from then? Do we get to a situation where these types of headsets start shipping in the tens or hundreds of millions, and the economics of scale, the mass market scale that needs to happen for the glasses optics, just get cut off on the pass? They just never catch up to what these start doing. I don't know. That's my question. That's my only exception to maybe they never ship, is if something like that should happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we should have mentioned when we talked about Puffin earlier, Meta's 2027 headset that will reportedly be really thin and light and offload almost everything to a compute puck. It will also reportedly be open periphery. And by that we mean that, in your VR headset today, for almost every headset, you block out the sides and the bottom with blackness so that you're more immersed. And Quest Pro experimented with giving you an open periphery, and a lot of people loved that. It was optional. You can add blinders if you want. So it's weird that what we will see is kind of these mixed reality headsets that are kind of like emulating AR glasses. They're kind of pretending to be AR glasses by being thin and light and glasses-like, and maybe we will see, better and better versions of eyesight come out. This is something we already have seen at CES and other shows. They have a lot of companies are innovating on this. And Ian asked a really interesting question. If you do get this headset that has high resolution, it's comfortable to wear, you can see a really convincing version of your eyes through it. That's what you're seeing here. This is the image isn't, sorry, the text isn't here, but this is a CAD render, to be crystal clear. What we're showing on screen right now is a CAD render of what it might look like to see a headset like this in the future. But once you do get this, like, putting on a pair of AR glasses for which you have no object permanence and it can't do can't do opacity, and it is inferior in all these ways, is going to feel like a downgrade. And the crazy part is that from a technology perspective, for a long time, this is even going to be the cheaper approach as well. So it's going to be really, really fascinating to see how that market dynamic plays out. And
Jorg, I get a 30-second warning on the Apple Vision Pro currently if I'm going to run out of battery. So you can imagine that being a 30-second warning to get off to the side of the road if you're operating a moving vehicle, even though you're not supposed to operate a moving vehicle in a VR headset. And do not ever do that. I've shamed people in the past who have done that, so don't do that. My point being that there is a software path to solving the battery issue, so to speak, of warning people well in advance of the battery going dead that you're about to be blinded.
There's also a obvious hardware solution here that we've talked about before, and that's a flip-up design, like Sony's upcoming standalone headset has. So we have an image here of UploadVR's Don Hopper wearing the Sony headset, being used in a safety critical scenario. Obviously, you would have to have software that is designed to be very, very reliable. But in theory, the things run out of battery, flip. You flip it up and you don't think about it, right? In the same way that there are, militaries today use night vision goggles that if they cut out, they can't see anything, right? What do? They're all flip up designs. So there are plenty of situations where soldiers have been in where their night vision cuts out and fails, be an electrical issue or power issue or something. They flip it up and they move on with their life, right? They go get another one. So I do think you're not going to want to drive a car probably, but you could imagine situations in which you're on a factory floor where you are using this, and if it fails, you flip it up.
Well, the car drives itself, and the headset provides you the view of the outside, the tank idea, right? Where
sure,
imagine yourself inside of a tank, but the tank is coated in sensors, and then you're inside the headset, inside the tank, and you're looking out the walls of your tank, but you're inside of a bunkered location inside of a tank, protected from everything. That's one way VR headsets work, right? Fundamentally, that is the way this technology works. Is you combine computer vision on top of VR, and you get magic. And it's going to be the theme of a lot of what we talk about again and again and again. You now in our audience are experts at this. You can try to explain this to others. You're going to fail at explaining this to others because it's something you have to see again and again in demos. Currently, my recommendation for people is go to a Ray-Ban store and try out a pair of glasses. Go to an Apple store and put on the Apple Vision Pro and try it on. And whenever I say that to people, they say, "How much is it?" I say, "Don't ask. You're asking the wrong question. Go to the Apple store and put on the headset, and then ask them how much money it is."
Yeah, so before we move on from glasses, there's one last type of glasses that we want to very, very briefly bring up, especially when it comes to kind of expectations. So the other kind of glasses that you have today are these media glasses that have a virtual display in front of you, the market leader there being X-Real. And so they actually use a very different optical stack than the kind of AR glasses that we're talking about today. So Snap Spectacles and Meta Orion and even those HUD glasses use a technology called waveguides. And with waveguides, you're able to actually still have a true glasses form factor, as in the distance from your eyes to the lenses are the same that they would be with regular glasses. So with X-Real, you have this different optical path called birdbath optics, and it's much cheaper and much simpler and easier to manufacture. And it does let you get transparent kind of optics into a cheap product. And with the X-Real, the current X-Real Pro model, you're actually even able to get 57 degrees diagonal of field of view. So there's one massive flaw in this, however, that I almost never see. And it's that they're not actually glasses. So talk about this optical path, the distance between your eyes and the lenses. With X-Real, they are really, really significantly far. So a lot of their marketing very carefully shows you an image from the front where you're like, these are glasses, those are glasses. But if you look at them from the side, they're actually so far set off your face that they look really, really off. And I said earlier in the show, I love to demo headsets and glasses to people, regular old people who aren't in the tech industry, who aren't involved in all this, and see what they say. And with the Snap spectacles, I've shown people images and they're like, damn, those are ugly. And I've used X-Real glasses in the presence of real people, and they're like, they find them really disconcerting because they're trying to look like glasses, but they aren't glasses. They look so odd and weird. I really think that X-Real should, in fact, in reality, go for a headset-like design. Look for something that try to do a design that doesn't try to pretend to be sunglasses, because you try so hard to pretend to be sunglasses that I struggle to find an image that really brings this across. But
it looks like a doll.
Sorry, let me finish the thought. In reality, when you have in reality, when you have a 3D view of someone, it's so much more obvious. When you see X-Real glasses for the first time in real life, you're like, okay, these aren't actually glasses.
It looks like a doll accessory is what I was going to say. I didn't mean to interrupt you, David. Sorry. It's just, it looks, everything you've described makes it look like an accessory you put on a doll, not an actual human-sized product. And that's not a good look.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great analogy. As is Big's comment here, going the uncanny valley of wearables. That's a great comment, Biggs. That is, you absolutely get the uncanny valley effect. So birdbath optics, they're cool and cheap. It's an interesting way to do this, but if you want AR glasses that people wear around in the same way that people wear their Ray-Ban glasses, which is on a regular basis, walking down the street, you need waveguides. There's no other technology that I know of that is remotely suitable for this other than waveguides.
All right, what else do we have on Meta? Are we on our last subject there yet? Have we finished Meta?
Yeah, no, we have one more to say, and we're just going to really quickly cover this because it was a really odd moment in the earnings call, and I really don't know what on earth he meant by this. I can't even find the featured image, but that's not a huge problem. We'll just quickly discuss it. So during this earnings call, the same one where he got these financials, Mark Zuckerberg said to investors, let me just bring this up here. This is the year when a number of long-term investments that we've been working on that will make the metaverse more visually stunning and inspiring will really start to land. And, he was referencing Horizon and that based on what he was talking about before. So we don't know what this is referring to, but apparently sometime this year, some Meta long-term investments are going to arrive to make Horizon Worlds visually stunning and inspiring.
Would you like to go to a private instance and reveal our personas to one another? That's the interaction I've been wondering whether we would see in VR for a very long time. You interact in public spaces as this cartoonish avatar, and then when you want to go private or go into a DM chat, imagine revealing your persona type avatar. You switch to codec avatars. I wondered if that's what Zuckerberg meant in this, and you seemed against it on the theorizing side, but I feel like that's the headset Meta needs to ship this year, and it would be an amazing feature to add.
Well, according to everything we know, Meta isn't shipping a headset this year. But
I meant with partners.
I don't think that's how you would describe codec avatars. You would say like, oh, we're going to give you the deepest sense of social connection you've ever had, or make the metaverse more visually stunning and inspiring is not how you would describe a V1 of codec avatars. I think this is something to do with rendering. They're either going to have some sort of like massive graphics update for Horizon Worlds, or maybe even start doing cloud rendering, or maybe some sort of AI neural super sampling. It's hard to know. It's a weird thing to say. The one thing I would note about earnings call statements is that it is illegal to lie to investors on an earnings call. So I always take what these executives say to their investors on an earnings call a lot more seriously than what they say in press releases to the press, right? Because you can legally lie in an interview, right? An executive could be interviewed by you, and he could tell you a lie, or she could tell you a lie, and that's legal, right? As far as I'm aware, there's no law against lying to a journalist. But when you're in an earnings call specifically to investors, that would be illegal. So there's something. He is talking about something, but we don't know what it is.
Yep. Well, I think we should probably move on to this next one as quickly as we can. We're running on a really long episode. We're going to be over 3 hours here, and I'm tired, and I know David's tired. And we are so thankful that we have so many people tuned in for this show. Thank you all. Hit that like button. Please consider becoming a member to support our work directly. It means an enormous amount whenever we see that support come in. We've actually been able to do some things for members first recently. We actually did a stream for members first last week, and I think we're going to start being able to do that more often with our streaming capabilities with Beck and Don out there. We've got a bunch of devs lined up to come into the studio for these streams. We've got a really, really cool system lined up where we can basically play a game live as we're interviewing a dev, and it's an amazing way to unlock Easter eggs and really get into a game. So you can tune in to those things in the future, and all of our members out there, we're going to try to do some things for you first. And we always see your comments in here in green, so it always means a lot that we see you're out there. We're going to talk about Mudra Link, David?
Yeah, this one we just want to briefly talk about because we have just talked about how this neural wristband from Meta will be the control method for their HUD glasses, potentially, and definitely for their AR glasses. So if you weren't tuning in then, it's this wristband. It goes around your wrist. You can see it over here. It senses the electrical signals going to your muscles that activate the muscles in your fingers so that they can do finger tracking without any camera seeing it. So you could have your hand in your jacket pocket and still be controlling an interface through micro gestures. That could be, turning your thumb into a D-pad and clicking like this. Over time, as it gets higher and higher fidelity, you could imagine very, very tiny, minute gestures, no matter where your hand is, even if it's in your pocket, controlling complicated interfaces. And eventually you could put two of these things on and have even a keyboard. So the news here we want to quickly cover is that Meta is not the only company doing this. There is this Israeli startup that is also doing it called Mudra Link. And UploadVR's Don Hopper tried it at CES. Here is their band, and here is UploadVR's Don Hopper wearing it. They plan to start shipping this as a $200 product sometime in the next few months, I think in the next few weeks even. And their idea is that they want to make this compatible with everything. So, it's just a generic Bluetooth controller for your iPad, anything that accepts a Bluetooth input. And so they don't want to, they're not making like an ecosystem around this. They're just building the input device. You could use it on other glasses from other companies. This could be kind of the maybe open's not the right word, but off-the-shelf alternative to Meta's wristband. And yeah, it's fascinating that they think they can do this profitably for $200. You're muted, Ian.
So Denver asking this question, I'm going to try to answer it here. I imagine yourself learning how to type on a keyboard, right? And then you learn how to type without actually looking at the keys. Imagine you're sending all these signals down your wrist to type on the keys, and they're sensing at the wrist what keys you're telling your fingers you want to press. How much training do you need to not actually click the keys and just send the signals down your wrist that you would use to press the keys, but you don't actually press the keys? There is potentially a route that they're talking about here where you just have these wristbands on laying at your side and you're sending a whole lot of commands down to your fingertips that you're not actually using. You're just sending them down to your wrists to operate what's more or less a phantom limb, a limb that's not actually there, and that's how you can interact with these systems long term. Zuckerberg has hinted at this idea on the record. He talked I asked him specifically about this face to face, and he does think we will get to operating a third limb with these devices eventually. So it's very hard to wrap your brain around, but there is a path where like you can start telling your hands to do less using these systems.
Yeah, it's truly fascinating, isn't it? That, we expected these first generation devices are going to be relatively simple. So it's, as I said, using your thumb as a D-pad and clicking. But as you get higher and higher fidelity sensing, we've already seen, as Ian just mentioned, in Meta's research, the idea of you're thinking about moving your finger and it can sense you're moving your finger because you're kind of sending that pre-signal and the same signal is going to your hand. It's just not going all the way to actually moving it, which is absolutely crazy. The idea that you have your hand literally not even moving and you're controlling an interface by thinking about moving your thumb. So do that right now if you're listening and you've got your hands free. Put your, hand down to your side and just move your thumb so subtly that you're almost not even moving it. And imagine using that as a precise input method. And it's so promising because what made the mouse such an incredible input method is that you're translating very minute movements into very precise and large movements on a screen, right? You have this, in the mouse, it's only two-dimensional, but you're using these minute movements to really have precision control. Imagine you kind of remove the middleman there of the physical device and move this into a sixth-off space where you can now manipulate interfaces by just thinking about the most subtle of finger movements. The potential here, once you get to like Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4 of these wristbands, it is astonishing. This is one of the first input technologies that we've seen in a while that truly could be as transformative as something like the mouse.
Yeah, imagine if you've ever had a buzz in your pocket because you thought your phone was buzzing you and you didn't actually have your phone in your pocket buzzing you. Imagine what that feels like when you train yourself that much into this system. And it's one of the things that I think about really long term is what kind of lock-in are we in for in the future once you so I've got the Tap XR band and I've had it for about 4 months now, and it's hours and hours of training to train myself on each and every single key mechanism to learn the keyboard on this system. I know with this one, they're going to do simple gestures, up, down, left, right sort of thing to cross that chasm. But once I learn how to type on a keyboard and express myself more quickly using these bands than the old keyboard, I'll never, ever go back. Keyboards are dead after that.
Yeah, I just think one thing we want to clarify is that the Tap XR band you're referring to is not this SEMG technology. It's very, very different. And I think, as far as I'm aware, you are working on an article on this that will explain this to the readers soon enough.
Yeah, we'll clarify that. It's just they're all working towards the same sort of solution. But one of the things we also need to just add before we move on is for all of you that are confused about hand tracking, these bands they're also going to vibrate. A lot of the bands in the future are going to vibrate with the experiences that you're having in VR. And that's going to be a big missing piece for the hand interfaces out there. You can imagine pinching, and the moment you pinch, the moment the system recognizes, you get a little vibration at the wrist to confirm that the pinch has been collected, and that can overnight change everything.
Yeah, that's something that is present in the current Meta prototype of the wristband. We don't know if that's going to make it to the product, but we do know that on the Orion demo, this is not just a sensing device. This also does indeed provide haptic feedback. And as Ian said, that has enormous potential because you have this kind of sensory substitution thing where as you're pressing a virtual button and you get the vibration on your wrist, your brain can actually match up that visual and haptic feedback sensation into something consistent. So it really feels like you're pressing something, which is a very useful shortcut for the future of these input devices.
So let's get into this Apple section. We've got 2 Apple stories here to discover, and then we've got that Google section that everybody out there has been waiting for, either to get excited or to tear down the past and what Google's done there. But I love this first Apple story because it is so illustrative of a lot of what we're talking about. So we've had a lot of debate in these comments. We have a lot of debate ongoing on an ongoing basis. Blair, you can be He said he hates the implication that he's a hater over in there in the comments. I saw the other
Seems ironic.
I saw the other commenter out there saying, what about the possibility that people just aren't interested in headsets? Well, Apple has a dedicated section of its stores in a side room for giving Apple Vision Pro demos. And there's two things or two or three things over the history of Meta's like attempting to make VR headsets that I've noticed, right? Meta didn't want to ship headsets that would break if you dropped them, like they would stop functioning, like that they didn't have any kind of system in place for you to go to a store, get it repaired, and get a new system. So their headsets needed to be pretty resilient, is one of the things Meta did. But also you didn't have a storefront. You don't have storefronts. And I think so many people underestimate the power of cities worldwide. If you have a big enough paycheck, right? If you have a big enough amount of money in your checking account, you can go in to do this demo and walk out with a changed system, and you can walk around with the system and have a new way of personal computing in your life. Meta can't do that, right? And I have to spend that time to express that this is powerful, right? Like, you can be a hater out there, but if you've got the money, you can walk out with a Vision Pro right after the demo, and Meta can't really match that.
That's a really good point. The Apple stores are one of Apple's greatest advantages, and their enormous potential for headsets and glasses, because a demo is so important, right? This is one of those technologies that you really don't understand until you try it. One of my favorite things in this world is demoing VR to someone who's never tried it before. And there have been countless people who I've done this for, and they've gone out and bought a headset either the next week, or they've waited for the next version because I've told them, wait 6 months, the next one's coming, and that's probably going to be the one you want to get. And I'm sure that Apple has the same thing happens in their store. But why this story is really impactful to me is that it really breaks the false narrative out there about Apple Vision Pro. If you were to only read the kind of mainstream clickbait tech media, that if you only read it, you would have a completely wrong vision of the world and everything, including our industry, you'd think that Apple Vision Pro was not only a flop, but discontinued, right? I've seen this sentiment so often from people reading clickbait headlines and not interrogating, wait a minute, was that actually true? So that's the narrative out there. Apple Vision Pro has not just failed, but it's failed so hard that Apple's discontinued it. Now let's see what's the reality. The reality is, not only have they not discontinued Vision Pro, you could verify that yourself in 5 seconds by going to apple.com and seeing that they still sell it. Or you could walk into an Apple store and see that it's still there. Not only that, but for their newest stores, their new store design, they have an entire side room for it. And I saw a comment, a question earlier in the show when we read out the topic lists going, well, is it just a side room for demos or is it for Vision Pro? It's for Vision Pro. According to both Apple's press release and to people who have been to this store. This is the newest store in Miami. I think it's the 6th Apple store in Miami and one of over 500 worldwide. But I also, shortly after this story, heard from someone that there's one that's opened in the UK in Milton Keynes that has this exact same design. So you have this dedicated side room for Apple Vision Pro and for demos, so that you can do these demos, which take anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes, depending on how much you want to do. Something they started doing, by the way, about 6 months after Vision Pro launched, is that they let you airdrop your own panoramas and spatial videos to the headset during your demo and see your own content. So if you have cool spatial videos or you have panoramas, you can go into this store and see them in 4K OLED on a giant screen in front of you. Instead of having all the hustle and bustle of trying to shoehorn this into these stores that were made 10, 15 years ago without this in mind, they now have this dedicated section so you can sit down and calmly and separately from all of the hassle of the rest of the store, just sit down and get a nice Vision Pro demo. So not only has Apple not abandoned Vision Pro, not only did it not fail, not only is it not discontinued, but their new store design is centered around it.
So we had a question earlier asking whether the Ray-Ban glasses use a separate app, and they do. So the Meta Ray-Ban glasses use the Meta View app, and then the Quest headset obviously has the Horizon app. two different apps to manage two different sets of glasses from Meta. The Snapchat glasses are, if you see the app that they have built for the Snapchat glasses, it's super duper slick, and it's exactly what you would want to imagine out of the Meta ecosystem and managing its devices. If you look at the tablet that the viewer the helper salesperson is giving, it shares a bunch of the features with the Quest app, and it shares a bunch of the features with the Snapchat app. They're doing a lot of the same things, streaming the view, letting you launch apps. This is incredible. This is so powerful at selling VR. And I'm seeing in our comments people echoing you of just how important giving those demos are. And just think about it, David. How many hundreds of demos, first-time VR demos, Apple is giving every single day?
I want this app at home, right? I don't have an iPhone, but I do have an iPad. I like to be in all the different ecosystems and not locked into anyone's. I want this at home. It would be so great to do this for Vision Pro demos, but that's beside the point for now. The point is, as you say, the number of high quality demos that Apple's going to be able to do at these stores in this kind of little side room that's not, got all the other people and hassle from the rest is going to be really impactful. And as we've said before, the thing you have to understand about Apple Vision Pro, Vision OS, and Apple's strategy here is that Vision Pro is just the start, and the real product here is Vision OS. So, yes, this headset is far too expensive. $3,500 is ridiculous. I agree with you. Ian can debate about that, but I agree with you. $3,500 is ridiculous. If you're saying that, 100% right. You're right. And yes, it's too heavy. Okay? Yes, it's too heavy. But this fallacy that people keep having of, oh, well, I guess that's it then. So I wonder, do you think it might be possible for Apple to make a cheaper headset next, and maybe it'll get cheaper after that? Do you think maybe it could get lighter? The answer to these questions is yes. Apple Vision Pro is the first headset to introduce these near 4K OLED micro displays. And they came from Sony. They're produced in very limited volume with poor yields at high cost. As we see the micro OLED supply chain expand, you're seeing the Play for Dream headset, the Shift All headset. Pimax claims they're going to make a headset with it. You've got Immersed saying they're going to make a headset with it. Samsung, Sony. You're going to see the cost of these headsets come down and down over time. And Apple's going to be able to make these things sleeker and lighter as well. So the idea isn't that we think that people are going to go into these demos and go, you know what, I'm going to spend $3,500 on a Vision Pro. But what they will do is that some time down the line, we don't want to speculate about when, it could be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, there is going to be an Apple Vision headset that comes out, whether it be called Vision Air or whatever, and it will get to their price point. So then, at some point, Apple will launch a $2,000 headset. Then they'll launch a $1,500 headset. Then someday they'll come with a $999 headset. And at some point, the quality of experience, the form factor, the breadth of content will get to the point where more and more people say, I remember how amazing that demo I had in that side room of that Apple store was. I'm going to go and try this thing out, or I'm going to go and buy this thing. This is the time I jump in.
Yeah, you come out of this demo and you go, that was too heavy for $3,500, and I'm not ready. This isn't for me right now. But in 2 years' time, when you see the new one, it's half the weight and it's running Vision OS 4, and there's a real possibility that like you could do something like bring your keyboard from home and get the key, get it automatically synced up to the thing. Like I have this fantasy. While I was picturing this, I was imagining people bringing their musical instruments into Apple stores just to confirm that they're compatible with the headset. But you can imagine that in the future pointing your iPhone at a musical instrument in your home and getting a pop-up and it says, yep, that's compatible with Apple Vision Pro. We're able to recognize it. Like we're on this path where you can learn to do things faster in these VR headsets than you could outside of. And everyone out there that like who hates on the technology or pretends to not see that, you just haven't paid attention to the data, right? Like it's been proven that you can do things but you can do things safer and more quickly by simulating them without the actual danger involved. And gosh, Beat Saber was just the beginning of musical learning here.
Yeah, there are Fortune 5 companies already using Apple Vision Pro for situations because they find that fidelity of simulation and training is better than doing these things traditionally on a 2D screen, and a lot cheaper than having to take every new trainee in. Yeah, there's enormous potential here. Do we want to move on to this, or is there anything else we want to say about Vision Pro for now?
Nope, I think that's it. We'll keep an eye on what the stores are doing over the course of the year.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's talk about this last Apple thing and then Android and get out of here, David. I'm tired.
Yeah, it's been a long few weeks. So we've just talked about the Apple Vision line, right? And Biggs has made a clever comment here of saying that it has Pro in the name. The people who think that this is going to be the only headset they ever make and that it's all going to be $3,500 should probably note that they didn't call it Apple Vision Pro for nothing. But you'll have all these Vision headsets. There might be a Vision Air and a standard Vision. We'll see what happens there. But what about glasses? So Meta has glasses. We've just talked about all of Meta's glasses. Surely Apple has some glasses plans too, right? Like Apple doesn't want to be left out of that. I'm sure Apple wants to do their own Orion, and that's what we'll talk about briefly now. So we have a report from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. You're going to hear that name over and over because he is kind of the leading, I guess you could say, leaker of information about these headsets from Meta and Apple. He has been incredibly reliable over time, though not always fully reliable, we'll point out. He described Vision Pro almost to a T before it launched, other than the name. And he thought it was going to be called Apple Reality Pro. And in fact, it sounds like they did a last minute rename anyway, because you can actually see the word reality used in some of the WWDC videos. But that's unimportant. The point is Gurman is very, very reliable. So while we're not going to say this is gospel, we're going to say that it's worth paying attention to the reports here. So according to Mark Gurman, as we've talked about before, Apple is going to launch Ray-Ban-like smart glasses in 2027, or at least that's its plan, to launch Apple glasses that would give you Siri and cameras and the ability to understand the world and take pictures and take phone calls, but integrated into the Apple ecosystem, connecting to your Apple Watch and your iPhone more seamlessly. All of a Ray-Ban Meta glasses, but for the Apple ecosystem world. 2027, according to Mark Gurman, is Apple's plan. But now we have a report about what's next for Apple's glasses. So according to Mark Gurman, Apple has a team in a secretive facility still working on MicroLED, micro LED displays with the intention of eventually going into AR glasses. So if you're unfamiliar with all these display terms, MicroLED is a truly new display technology. It is not the same thing as micro OLED. It's not the same thing as OLED micro displays. So forget about those for a second. It's also not a fancy LCD. There are a lot of misleading marketing names for LCD displays with a fancy backlight. So they're QLED, mini LED. Those things are just LCD with like maybe a layer in front to make the colors a bit punchier and a lot of little backlights instead of one big backlight. So you kind of people could disparagingly call it the poor man's OLED or the kind of OLED emulator, right? MicroLED, on the other hand, is a really new display technology. It's truly new. It is separate from LCD and OLED. And it is self-emissive like OLED, so each pixel emits light and color, but it has the potential to be much more power efficient than OLED. So that makes it ideal for use in AR glasses, right? Because you could get this really high brightness without having to have an enormous battery, right? You can still fit it into glasses-like form factor. There are other potential advantages of MicroLED that may be seen over time. You may be able to go to really, really, really high pixel densities and brightnesses beyond micro OLED, but those are still in research. So most major companies are researching MicroLED today. All of the big display companies, Samsung and LG and everyone, they're researching it very, very heavily. Meta has secured the entire output of a UK micro LED startup. Google acquired a US micro LED startup. And today we've actually seen last year the first generation of micro LED displays ship. So the Ray Neo X2 glasses that we talked about as being the first AR glasses, obviously they were terrible, and go and read our review for the details, but they have these really early MicroLED glasses, right? So you go out and buy these things in a product that costs like $600 to $800. They exist. They're very, very, very low resolution though. They're 480p, but they exist. And they're one of the reasons that Rainier was able to build AR glasses last year. They're also used in Meta's Orion prototype, right? They use micro-LED displays in there. And so they are just ideal for AR glasses with battery lives that are measured in hours rather than minutes. Because one thing we forgot to mention back when we talked about the Snap spectacles, which don't use micro-LED, they use LCOS, is that they have a battery life of 45 minutes. So ideally, you want micro-LED. So Apple was, for a long time, according to a bunch of different reports, this is pretty much common knowledge, researching micro-LED with the intention to introduce it in an Apple Watch. And the idea is that because of this incredible power efficiency, you could get Apple Watches that, today are between like 1 and 1.5 days of battery life. What if you could get an Apple Watch that had 3 days of battery life or something like that? That would be the dream of eventually deploying this. So according to Gurman, last year, Apple realized that this was going to be too hard to do on the size of an Apple Watch anytime soon, and they scrapped that idea and laid off a bunch of people last year and got rid of that idea. But Gurman's new report says that some of the team was kept around and retasked to say that you are still going to build micro LED, but for our future AR glasses. So that is what this secretive team that is 15 minutes away from Apple's headquarters, they're in Santa Clara, apparently, are working on. That's the kind of interesting news. The bad news is that, according to Gurman, Apple's executives don't expect this to be ready for a product, these displays, until 2028 at the absolute earliest. So that would be if everything goes right on this project, they could come out with Apple AR glasses in 2028. And if there are any delays at all, you're talking about 2029 or into the 2030s.
All right. I think we're ready to get into the Google section here as the last section of our show. Thank you to everyone for tuning in through this long episode. We do have more people tuned in now than we did earlier, so it seems like people are sticking around. Do hit that like button and do consider becoming a member as we get into the Android section. I'm really interested to talk about this.
One comment.
There anything else? Go ahead,
Yeah,
David.
sorry. Just one comment I want to bring up before we go straight in. Yes, LL, there is another section. We have one final section. Craig Melville asked this very frequent question: could transparent OLED be used for glasses? And it's a really appealing question at first thought, because it seems like you solve all these issues, right? Like you get rid of all these crazy waveguides, just put a transparent OLED, and then you can, have whatever images you want at a really wide field of view. The problem is that you ignore the focus idea, right? Take your smartphone screen right now, if you have one in your hand, or your monitor, and put your head right up to it and really, really close. You can't focus on it, right? People often disparagingly joke about the idea of, when I was a kid, I was told not to put my head near the screen. Now I have a head 30 centimeters away or 10 centimeters away screen. But to your eyes, the image in a VR headset is actually meters away, and sometimes focused out to infinity. The lenses mean that you're not actually, from your eyes perspective, seeing something right beside you. The image you're seeing in a Quest headset is at like 2 meters optically. So same thing's going to happen when it comes to birdbath optics, waveguides. You can't do this in one. You can't just have the display. You need lenses as well. So when we're talking about waveguides, that's really just the kind of lens in this analogy on the AR system. You also have like a projector, which is the display equivalent. And on some, that's LCOS. On some, like birdbath optics, it's micro OLED. And in Orion and eventual future AR glasses that are slim and light, it's going to be micro LED. So it would be great if that would be possible, but you wouldn't be able to focus on it. It would just be like blurry in the same way that if you bring your phone screen up to your face, it's blurry.
All right, let's talk about Android XR. So Android XR had a video that they released, as well as I had my demo late last year. But there is this first bit of news that they acquired some of HTC Vive's engineering team for Android XR. This is big. I think this is really, really, really big. And I think a lot of people in our audience that may have written off Google's effort here, that may have not forgiven them for what they did with Daydream, may need to second guess, or at least give them another look now that they've made this move, because it indicates that they're serious to me in a way that I think developers needed to hear. But David, is there any other context there that you want to add? Is there anything else to cover here?
Yeah, I strongly agree with you, Ian, to say that this is big. And I was actually surprised by how little attention this got relative to how big it is. It seemed that people kind of just looked at this and really didn't consider the significance here. So this is a $250 million deal, $250 million for Google to acquire a sum of HTC Vive's engineering team. And they've said that they're going to use this to accelerate the development of Android XR for both headsets and glasses. So, you know, you can say what you want about HTC Vive, and a lot of the issues you may bring up with them are related to their market position, them not having the kind of funds to pour quasi-infinite money into this, like companies like Meta and Apple do. They are a relatively small company competing in an industry against giants. So I would imagine that some of the engineers that are working on HTC are incredibly talented people that have had, most importantly, other than the talent, years and years of experience in this industry. And Google is taking some of them and bringing them over to work on the Android XR project. This is actually mirrors what Google did back in 2017 when they acquired a huge portion of HTC's smartphone engineers, and they used them to turn Pixel phones from a joke into today, in my biased opinion as a Pixel phone owner, one of the best phones you can buy, depending on your preferences. So, yeah, Greg Melville just brought that up in the comments, perhaps a bit delayed. They didn't buy HTC, they bought their smartphone engineering division. And now you see a similar thing happening where they're buying some of, I would love to know the scale. I'm sure you would too, Ian. How many is some of? Anyone know what some of means?
Yeah, right.
10%, 90%? How many people are still at HTC? Is HTC still going to, like, are they going to use Android XR in their future headsets? There's a lot going on behind the scenes that I'm sure Ian and I would both love to know.
I mean, that question may have answered it, right? Like, what a brilliant way to get Android supported by, get Android XR supported instead of Meta Horizon supported by a whole bunch of headsets out there, than to hire the team and, turn around and offer them the operating system. But Gigo, honestly, what's left at HTC at this point I think that's a valid question to wonder.
Yeah, we really want to know, right? And so something similar happened to Magic Leap last year, right? And Google had this massive licensing deal with Magic Leap established for their technology. They're going to basically run Android XR, I think, is the implication there, and use Magic Leap like headsets, and maybe Google's making them. A lot of these deals are really confusing, and we don't really know what's happening. But what I think we can draw from this is that I think Google is a lot more serious about Android XR than the detractors think. I think this is going to be a really significant year for this industry, and Android XR is going to put a massive fork in the road of what's happening here. I don't think the kind of situation of there is Apple Vision and there is MetaQuest is going to still be the industry at the end of this year. I think this is one of the most significant things to ever happen to this industry.
So there was a period of about 6 months that I remember trying to find if I could install both Daydream apps and Samsung Gear VR apps on a single phone. Like, I think it was the Samsung phone that I was trying to figure out whether I could support both VR operating systems at once. And it wasn't fun. It was like I think it did work, but it worked halfway, and but it was a silly thing where all of this has happened before, right? We did this once, and in our comments, people are like, "Wait, didn't Google already buy HTC?" Like, that's funny, because back in the day, I remember that news that they were buying the phone company, the phone part of the business, thinking, oh, they're actually acquiring the VR part of the business. And I took a step back and realized, oh, wait, they're actually saying they don't need or want that part of the business. They want a different part of the business right now. And it felt odd, right? It felt wrong. It felt like a hint that they weren't actually invested at the level that they needed to be. And sure enough, all these years later, we've kind of seen that prove out. But we've done a 3-hour conversation today, David, and we had the question, where are the high-end Meta headsets? Google is trying to rally together a whole bunch of people to make Android-based headsets themselves. And at the end of the day, our viewers out there, all they want is their Google Play apps and their Horizon apps to play together. They want both. They want that system that I imagined back in 2017, 2018, where I had all my Samsung Gear VR apps and my Daydream apps all on one device. And I don't know if anyone's going to get together and make this happen for them.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. If it maybe in 5 years, and when one company loses, right, then they start working with the other company. For now, I think we're going to see fierce competition. Meta and Google both want this position. They know that there's going to be Apple Vision in the market as the closed Apple ecosystem solution. Meta and Google want to be that open alternative. They want to be the Windows of this industry. With Meta wants to do both. It wants to have a first-party hardware and third-party. Google just wants to be the software provider with these companies. And this is going to be interesting because I think Meta is going to see the kind of competition they simply haven't seen yet. The closest thing to competition Meta really had was Pico, right? And it launched, only in Europe. And with Pico 4 Ultra, they've kind of given up on that direct competition. Creative Experiment says in the comment, there's already Android VR. It's called Pico 4. Yeah, so the distinction that people always make here, and some of it's just technicality and some of it does need to be clarified, is that it's true to say that Quest headsets, Vive standalone headsets, and Pico headsets already do run Android underneath. They run the open source core of Android as their kind of core, the AOSP, Android Open Source Project. And then around that, they have all of their own proprietary software and platform, be it the tracking system, be it the store system, mixed reality technology. All of this is added on top of this kind of core, okay? And so sure, it's interesting to technically point that out because it means that there's broad compatibility. If you make an OpenXR Android app, in most cases, unless you're using a proprietary API, you can pretty easily get that running on all of these headsets, right? From an actual simple technical level. But when it comes to a consumer platform level, right, as a buyer, that distinction doesn't really matter. It's the same thing as saying that, sure, Amazon Fire Sticks and Amazon Fire tablets run Android. Sure, they do, but you don't get Google Play on them, right? And that's the real distinction. You don't get Google services, you get Amazon services. So Meta is going to be in a very similar position in the market to Amazon when it comes to tablets and TVs, where they're using the Android open source core, but on top of it is all of their own technologies and services that make it quite a distinct thing. To the user, to the end user, at least the average one that doesn't do side loading, Horizon OS might as well be a completely different OS.
So Free Sky giving us a transition question to our final topic of today. Did we see the video on the Android XR demo? It looked a lot like Vision Pro. I actually recorded videos at my demo of Android XR because I was using the Meta glasses to try to record audio for my notes, but I didn't have any intention of using the video or anything. I just wanted to get it for my notes, and it upset the Google people. I didn't have permission to do that. Well, someone got permission to take those, to make that video of the Android XR headset, and yeah, everyone's getting a look at it. This is the headset, or very similar to the headset I tried. I don't like the back strap. I'm over the back strap, David.
Yeah.
Sorry, David, why don't you break down what he revealed in this video?
Sure, yeah. So as Ian said, Ian was able to try out this headset in December. You can go to UploadVR.com and search Samsung in our search and you'll find Ian's report. But Ian was not allowed to take his own footage. He was not allowed to take his own screenshots. He was provided a render from Samsung and some Android XR simulator footage from Google. So I do think you should read Ian's impressions because they're interesting. But if you're looking for something visual that's real, you can't get that because, as Ian said, unfortunately, only MKBHD, Marcus Brownlee, was given that as an exclusive. As far as I'm aware, he is the leading tech YouTuber, so you can see why that makes sense from Google and Samsung's perspective. But we really hope if anyone from Google and Samsung is watching, please let us do this. We would love to talk to our audience about this and be able to show them exactly what we were trying as well. So on the hardware side, it is true to say that there is a deep similarity to Apple Vision Pro. In fact, Marquez said that when he teased this video to his audience on social media by showing a screenshot of him wearing it, a lot of the response was, why are you doing another Vision Pro video? People literally thought that this was Apple Vision Pro. So that goes to show you. Now, we could have a discussion about Samsung's copying of Apple, and there is fierce debate about that, depending on whether you're an iPhone user or a Samsung phone user. I think we can all agree, though, that Samsung phones didn't look anything like iPhones until the iPhone came out, and then they all suddenly started to look a lot like iPhones, and that has happened many, many times. You see Samsung put the iPhone-like notch into one of their tablets, and there's been inspiration from Apple to the rest of the industry over time. And when you get to Chinese brands, it gets ridiculous. There are some of the Chinese Android forks that are literally just shameless copies of iOS. That said, when it comes to designing a headset, there are always going to be kind of shared ideas and things that make sense from an engineering and design perspective that are going to be similar. So there's a balance there. But while this does look like Vision Pro, there are 4 important hardware differences to note that you can see quite well in this video. One of them is the facepad. Another is the strap, as Ian said. The third is the lack of eyesight. And the fourth is the open periphery, which I guess is kind of the same thing as the facepad. So let's talk about the facepad and open periphery. So Quest and Pico headsets use this kind of ski goggles-like approach where you have this facial interface that is, touching your forehead, your cheeks, your temples. You know what it's like. You've all probably worn one. In contrast, Samsung's headset actually uses a soft halo strap. It doesn't look like that from the outside, especially when you look at it from this kind of angle. It looks like it's a face pad, but it's really just a clever design designed to hide the fact that it uses a halo strap. So it actually is on the top of your head and your top of your forehead here, and it's not touching here. And because they don't include a facial interface by default, you also get an open periphery. So from that perspective, it's actually a lot more similar to Quest Pro than Apple Vision Pro. The design here at the front visor looks like Vision Pro, but the actual kind of ergonomics here is Quest Pro-like, and that comes even more so when you look at the back strap, right? This is pretty much a Quest Elite strap, the kind of thing you would get for your Quest 2, your Quest 3 on the rear. Interestingly, unlike Quest Pro and Pico, it doesn't have a battery back here. This is just a hard rear strap. And a hard rear strap is kind of useful for certain things, right? It acts as a counterbalance. It keeps the headset very firm, but it has a massive disadvantage. You can't lean back on a chair, on a bed, on a sofa, if you're in an airplane seat. I've tried to use this kind of strap on an airplane, watch a movie, and I hated it. I really love the default Apple Vision Pro strap for this because you can literally just lean back. So this is an interesting design choice they've made here because they're actually cutting off lying back and watching a movie in this headset. What they have gone for is the Vision Pro style, like external battery that's coming out here from a cable. It looks a little bit less premium, and people have pointed out that this part looks like it's on its last legs. You can actually, if you look really closely, see it cracking a bit. So I wonder if that'll be refined. But yeah, the other difference, of course, is it has no eyesight. So it's thinner and lighter than Vision Pro because it doesn't have that front lenticular OLED display trying to emulate your eyes. So those are the 4 important hardware differences that make this really quite different from Vision Pro. It's kind of like Apple Vision Pro and Quest Pro had a baby, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting to imagine, like, is that going to find success? And it doesn't necessarily matter. Like if Android Android as an operating system found success, even though you can't really point to any one great like Android phone that was the phone of a generation. Like I don't know. I guess everyone has a beloved Android phone that they bought as their first, but not the same. Nothing carries the same weight as an iPhone. Yet Android is the dominant operating system. This headset doesn't need to be the end all be all of the Android XR ecosystem, right? There could be a whole lot of other options in a whole lot of other configurations running Android XR. It's just someone has to put all the pieces together in the most in the right way. Like I don't know. We still haven't yet seen controllers used in this ecosystem. I don't know. There were what I saw in the demo was barely scratching the surface of the operating system. When I went to Apple and tried Apple for the first time, I tried a very, very polished system. when I went and tried Google, I didn't see as polished of an operating system. However, I did see some very, very cool things. And Google Earth needs to be on every headset. I want Google Earth on not just Android XR. And honestly, if Meta doesn't have Google Earth, it's going to be missing out a lot without it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's Google's big pitch for Android XR and why they probably won't bring it for a long time to other platforms, right? That you have all of these high quality Google services that you rely on. It's Meta's biggest strategic disadvantage that you're in this ecosystem that's completely divorced from what you currently use, right? Realistically, if you are an iPhone user, you're going to want to get an Apple Vision headset because it's going to integrate with all of your existing services, assuming you're the kind of iPhone user that does use Apple services, right? If you're an Android user, you're going to get all the benefits of your Google Photos, your Google Maps, all of your other Google services that integrate with Gemini, like Gmail, on your Android XR headset. The problem is if you're going for the Meta ecosystem, you get neither of these things. This existing ecosystem integration is Apple and Google's biggest advantage that Meta simply cannot match. So, as you said, yeah, you were deeply impressed by the integration of Gemini and Maps, and so was Marquez in his demo, right? So, for example, if you didn't watch this video, I really recommend you did. He was reading a book, a real life book, and he used the Gemini circle to search feature to circle something and go, "Can you show me where this is?" And Gemini brings up Google Maps in a 2D window to the location of where what he was reading about is in Google Maps. And then by pressing one button, he goes into immersive mode and he's now in essentially Google Earth VR, right? Except running on a standalone headset. All of these kind of integration are going to matter. You're able to go into Google Photos and bring up all your photos. You're able to go to Chrome, and instead of like the Meta Quest browser where you have none of your bookmarks, you have none of your passwords, you have to kind of awkwardly get all of your passwords off your phone. Everything's there. It all syncs over, right? You go to sign into something and your password fills in and your bookmarks are there and all of your preferences. It's just like you're using Chrome on your phone or on your PC. This is going to be a huge, huge struggle for Meta. And as Bionic Freak in the comments says, this isn't Meta's fault. Sure. And they begged for Google Play support. And according to Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth, Meta was willing to give Google the entire 30% cut for 2D apps. So if Google had said yes to Meta, according to Andrew Bosworth, they would have been able to put the Play Store on Quest headsets and give you all of those apps from the Play Store, all of your existing 2D apps from Netflix to Disney Plus to everything, except that Google would get the money. Now, the disagreement there is that Meta wanted to restrict immersive apps, mixed reality and VR, to the Horizon Store, whereas Google is saying, no, we want both. We want the Play Store to serve 2D and immersive and everything in between, and we want to own the platform ourselves. And that's what they're doing with Android XR.
So we saw a question here, and David, why don't you look through the comments there to see if there's any questions that we should address before we head off the show. But one of the questions was asking, how does Meta foster a new ecosystem? They really have to provide heavy incentives on the dev side. Meta is facing this issue where their advantage is the controllers. They've solidified the VR ecosystem. Every game developer that's made a game, 95% of them are all controller tracked games, to track controller games in your hand. Apple Vision Pro arrived on the scene, no controllers for a year at least, right? Nothing. Everything is hand tracking, everything is eye tracking. Here's Android XR shown off, at least in the initial demos, without controllers. How does Meta evolve its ecosystem to support hand tracking as the first mode of interaction, the default mode of interaction? There's still some things that they need to do to make that possible, and then they need to invest in getting apps and everything made for that new reality. And I have to bring up the most innovative app to use the Meta Quest ecosystem in the last year was Pencil. And because Pencil turned the track controller into a paperweight that now gave you tracked paper. And so now you had tracked paper in VR, and it was brilliant thing. But I think it's indicative of everything across the ecosystem. Every app needs to turn the controller into a paperweight and, become with the reality that you've got to track your hands.
So I think the bull case for Meta would be that traditional 2D apps and ecosystem integration don't matter as much as Apple and Google hope they would. In the same way that you might own an iPhone or an Android phone and still use a Windows PC and see no issue with that, right? You don't care that your phone doesn't properly integrate with your PC. What you're doing with these is so different that it doesn't matter to you, right? You don't care that your iPhone doesn't integrate with your Windows PC. That's Meta's hope, I guess. And that in reality, when it does come to doing, serious work where you might need applications that are powerful, well, Vision OS and Android aren't going to do that anyway. You're not going to run Unity. You're not going to run After Effects or Photoshop on these headsets. You're going to go over and use a Windows PC or a Mac. And Meta has this integration now in their partnership with Microsoft, where you just look at your Windows 11 PC and click one virtual button and you're in. So that's going to be Meta's hope, I think, that for the serious workloads, they lean heavily into their partnership with Microsoft. I still do think, though, you are going to want to do light computing on these things in the same way that you do light computing on your phone and on your tablet and your laptop. And there's going to be a struggle there. I think I think Meta's strategy here could be to lean further into that Microsoft partnership. If I were Meta, I would be trying to say, how do I make it so that, I can integrate with maybe Microsoft Edge on PC, for example. The other thing is they may just have to go on a spree of bringing their Horizon OS services to your phone, right? If you can't get Chrome, launch the Meta Quest browser or Horizon OS browser on your phone, right? Put it on the Play Store and the iPhone Store and let people who really care about using their Quest headset use that too, right? If Microsoft has Edge on phones, there's Mozilla Firefox on phones, let people use that ecosystem. But Amazon's kind of done this as well, right? Where Amazon's come across the issue of, for their Alexa screens and for their tablets and Fire TV, they don't have access to your Google Photos or your iCloud Photos. So they launched Amazon Photos and they've been marketing it heavily in the UK right now. They have little TV ads for it where they say, switch over, we'll give you unlimited photo storage. And so you actually use the relative openness of phones and your traditional devices to say, we're going to bring the Meta ecosystem over here so that it does integrate more with your phone. But the fact that they need to be thinking about these things and they need to be doing this like yesterday. It does seem like Meta is kind of just like careening into here. They launched a calendar app on Horizon OS last month, like that integrates with your existing calendars, but it needs to go so much further. They need to start thinking about this as a serious threat and taking it on rather than just kind of walking into oblivion here.
Yeah, and there's so many good comments here. There's the good old chicken and the egg comment about content. Free Sky saying gamers still want controllers, casual users want hand tracking. The best move would be to support both. That's true, but that doesn't necessarily work for game developers who need to figure out how to make a game work for both input schemes. The same type of game might not work on both types, and the same. That's true of the actual experiences themselves. If you want a passive experience, you don't want to be holding something in your hand the entire time. You only want something in your hand if you're actually active the entire time. And then Guy Godin's comment here, everyone is fighting over our 30%.
Yeah,
it's a very key comment there for us to think about from Virtual Desktop, and a good note for us to start closing out the show on, I think. David, anything else you want to comment on?
Yeah, my last thought here is that the other bull case for Meta here is that if it is correct that more and more of our computing tasks over time will be handled by AI agents, right? So a lot of these big companies, be it Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Meta, suggest that this year we're going to see these chatbots that are powered by large language models become agentic. So tasks that today you would go onto your computer or your phone and physically open an app and type into something and click something, they claim are going to be handled more and more over time by agentic chatbots. So instead of just asking ChatGPT a question, you're going to say, go order me pizza, or it's a bad example, but something real that physically happens, right? Go and get something for me. And it will go and in the background perform a task and then come back to you with a notification. If that is correct, and that more of these tasks over time are handled by AI, then that also leans in to these existing ecosystems not matter as much, because we're going to see these new ecosystems spring up anyway, and these all of these services that today you might be standing at the corner and order an Uber by bringing up the Uber app on your phone and pressing a button and choosing the location. Well, Meta's case would be that having the Uber app doesn't matter as much if you have your Meta AI glasses in a year from now and you say, hey, Meta, order me an Uber to here to my house. And it knows where you are because it has GPS and it uses the camera to do visual localization, just like exists in Google Maps today. It knows where your house is because you've told it, and it just does all of that in the background. And so if traditional apps become less important, then all Meta has to do is continue to invest in Meta AI and hope that over time, even in your Quest headset, more and more tasks will just be asking the AI. So I'm just saying what we could see here is that the only way that Meta isn't screwed by Android XR is if traditional app ecosystems matter less and less over time, and that's one way in which they massively could.
Fascinating note to leave us on. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. Robert Quinones Biggs. Let's see what other members we had out there. We had a lot of them over the course of the show. I'm just scrolling up. We had Guy Godin, we had Anti-Cleric out there, Arlen. Thank you all for our regular viewers out there. And I will be thinking about the time-traveling viewers and listeners in the future now that I know you're out there watching us at 2 times the speed of normal humans. Please take care of yourself. We'll see you in the future. Thank you for giving us your time. Tune in to Don Hopper as he gets into games and mods on Fridays usually. And then we'll have our games casts on Tuesdays as we dive into all the latest. We also have a lineup coming of very, very cool devs running through us their entire gameographies, going back to their first VR games to their most recent VR games. We're going to start spinning that up on our channel with Don pretty soon. So tune in. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks again. We'll talk next week. This has been a massive, massive show. A lot to think about. If you do have ideas that you didn't get into the live chat, or you're listening or watching after, put your comment below. We mostly get time to read them. We hope we do get time to read them all, and we'll respond when we can. Thanks so much, everyone.
See you.